And we're live. How's everybody doing? Today we're going to do a call-in show. It's actually been quite some time since we've done one of these. It's really an opportunity to hear from the audience, receive feedback, allow people to ask questions, and allow people to just share what's on their mind. Just some ground rules. Tensions are high, and there's no shortage of hate going around the internet. So that's not what we're here to facilitate. You can share a wide range of different opinions, but if you're going to engage in group hate or forms of incitement, we're just not going to have it. If you're interested in that, go to Twitter and you'll find plenty. Again, we're all about engaging respectfully on the vast landscape of different perspectives, but that ends with hating others or inciting against others. I'm going to drop the link. When you come on, either put your video on or put a thumbnail on for the aesthetic. And yeah, let's have a good time. A lot of people have reached out asking how they can help. So, I mentioned we need help with clipping and video editing. I had like 5 people reach out, so I think we're good there. Another way to help is, we have a Patreon. You can become a member also through YouTube. You could donate on PayPal, and you could see all of this in the description. Any amount of support helps. The money really just all gets invested back into the YouTube channel. So, for example, we need somebody to help with graphic design. We need somebody to help with bookings, right? There's a lot of very interesting guests that can come on the program. I simply don't have time to reach out. I'm building a company. I work many hours. I've been clearing up time to do this because it's a topic that's very dear to me. But I'd like to bring on a few part or even eventually a full-time member. So if we have enough patrons that are supporting the show monthly, then we could really take this project to the next level. And really the long-term vision is not just Israel-Palestine. It's really a platform where people from opposing sides of conflicts are coming together. So Israel-Palestine is obviously an important one, but we could focus also on Russia and Ukraine, Armenia, Azerbaijan, India, Pakistan, Republicans and Democrats, white people and black people, right? There's so many divides in this world. And in many ways, social media further polarizes us. So the idea of this platform is to really bridge the divide. And if we could have a part or full-time member working, then we could really take it to the next level. So any support helps. You could find information for that in the description, or you could just join. I think if you're watching this, you'll see there's a join button and you could click join and also give like $5 a month. That also helps. So any support is appreciated. Those who give $20 a month get a shout out every episode. So right now we have Matthew Coggins and Renee Gordon. They're our visionary members. Thank you for the support. And thank you for everyone who supported the show, either monetarily or by volunteering their time. It's all very much appreciated. And also just by showing up and watching this, that's a way to support. Commenting, liking, sharing this with friends. There's many ways to support, so it's very much appreciated. I dropped the link to the chat. You'll see a link in the chat. Just grab that, enter, and you'll be on. Rami, I see you said you want to join, so here's your opportunity. I know a few people have already reached out saying they're interested in joining, so it should be an interesting one. In the meantime, if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop them in chat and let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. Very much appreciated. Also, like when I look at the analytics, it's interesting because it seems like 80% of the viewers aren't subscribers. So if you're viewing and aren't subscribed, subscribe. And what's the importance if you see it anyways, right? It's interesting, like why subscribe to a channel if the algorithm knows you're going to watch it, so it pops on your newsfeed. I think that the more subscribers a channel has, the farther the algorithm pushes it. So it's just better for us to get to be viewed by as many people as possible. So that's the benefit. Kwasi Rami wants to join, but is trying to fix his mic. Cool. So we're currently, I believe, day 18 since the attacks in the south, and what a few weeks it's been. I'm currently in. For those who don't know, I'm currently in Venice, California. I've been here um, the past 10 or so months building my community and company called Grateful Giraffes. I'm flying back to Israel on Sunday. This was a trip that I already had planned. I obviously I was planning on going under better circumstances, but I am going nonetheless. My whole family's there, so it's a good time to be with family. Um, while I'm there, my main priority is really seeing family, but I am going to try to meet with Israelis and Palestinians and do in-person in-person interviews. I think that could be interesting. Everything we're doing right now is virtual, but I'd like to go to Jerusalem and speak to Palestinians and maybe also some in the north. So that's something I'm going to be focusing on. So if anybody's living on the land and you're watching this and you want to do something, reach out to me. Also, you could find that in the description. There is some chance I get called for reserves, which would make my trip quite a bit more interesting. For those who have watched this channel know that I'm conflicted on the military. Israel's military is essential for our survival, so I'm not outright against it. But there's many excesses in the military, many policies, and what I would describe as excess force in many situations that I outright don't support. And I understand that what we view as essential for security, Palestinians view as inherently oppressive, and rightfully so. So if I get drafted and I see they want to send me to some kind of a defensive position where I know I could protect my family, then there's a good chance I would do it. If they want to send me to something offensive where I feel like I would be not only under the command of a government I don't support or trust, but put in a situation where I'm likely to harm others or myself get harmed, then I'd probably deny to go. And then it's unclear what the consequences then could be. Like, I think there is some possibility I would need to go to military prison, probably only for a few weeks. And I've been before. It's not that bad. If anything, it'll be a good digital detox. So much screen time these days. So maybe a few weeks in military prison would be kind of like a nice little retreat. All depends how we look at it. So I see we have, we're getting love from the UK. Cool. People all over the world, Israel, love from London. So again, I'm going to drop the link again if anybody wants to hop on. A few people have said they're going to hop on to chat, but when push comes to shove, where the hell are you? You might notice my mouth is a little bit blue. There's this half my tongue is blue. There's this, hold on, let me show you something. The community we're building is really focused on health and wellness stuff, and I'm always looking how to optimize my well-being and hit new levels of focus. So I try these different nootropics. So this one is comes in this little package, these little blue things. They don't sponsor me yet, but they should, honestly. This breaks up into 4, and you put one in your mouth, and it's meant to really increase focus. And it has something called methylene blue in it, which is what's turning my mouth blue. They call it blue carnitine, I think. But it also has like caffeine and nicotine and all sorts of interesting things in there. So yeah. People don't know this, actually. Nicotine is a great nootropic. It's great for focus. It energizes. It's just highly addictive. So, and smoking anything is just bad for you. So it's all in moderation. And if you feel like you can have control over the usage. We're getting a hello from Haifa. Hello back. So I don't know if you heard, but I will be in Israel. I might try to come to Haifa. So if you'd like to meet, reach out to me. So what reports do we have from the ground right now? So it's still early here in LA. I'm still catching up, but it says Israel agrees to delay Gaza ground invasion. Wall Street Journal reports, and this is at the U.S. request. Um, so it it's interesting. It seems like the U.S. is preparing for like a larger scale war in the Middle East, um, and I there's two different analyses that I've heard. One is that this entire plan, right? Like Hamas attacking the way they did, they knew this would result in a ground invasion, right? It's hard to believe they didn't think that the response would be something similar to this. Now, one theory is that the idea was to get the Israeli military caught up deep into Gaza, and then Hezbollah joins and attacks when Israel is unprepared. Um, so, if there's some intelligence or some reason to believe that this is the case, and this is also would involve Iran. Um, Unclear if directly, but they're already indirectly very, very much involved. Um, it's possible that there's intelligence that there are other fronts that are going to attack, and the U.S. wants to be prepared for that. Another one is that the U.S. just sees a potential here because U.S. foreign policy is very, very rarely about humanitarian issues like they often describe. It's more so about like their geopolitical advantage. It's how do we get more and more countries into the US sphere of influence? How do we weaken other superpowers like China and Russia? So if they see an opportunity here to increase their sphere of influence, they're going to take it. So it's unclear exactly what their motivation is. It could be both. Aya's asking, how can you call? I just dropped the link in the chat, so you just enter that link and then you'll be on. Alprozolam asked, yeah, the ground invasion still has not begun. It still has not begun. Yeah, Chris Roberts is saying students for justice in Palestine is now banned in Florida. I haven't looked deeply into that, but this does seem like quite an infringement on free speech, if I'm to be completely honest. I would want to understand why they were banned. There's two forms of speech that are not free, that are not legal, and that's incitement to violence and libel. Now, incitement to violence is quite subjective, right? You see many on like the far left, they would say Ben Shapiro coming to a university and speaking is incitement against trans people because he has anti-trans views. That seems like a little bit of a stretch of what incitement means. If somebody were to say attack these people, or you could clearly see how somebody's words are causing violence towards a group, then I think you can make the claim that that's incitement. So if there's a case to be made against SJP that that's what's happening, then I'd say you could ban them on those grounds. But it's not a good look when pro-Palestinian groups are being banned, especially when their means of resistance are nonviolent, because there's two things at play here. One, we often say, where's all the nonviolent Palestinian resistance? And then we widely condemn BDS. So it's like, okay, if we're against BDS and we're against violence, then what do we support besides total submission, right? So we should be allowing and embracing forms of nonviolent Palestinian resistance because, had this been the primary form of resistance that Palestinians used the past 100 plus years, then they'd be in a much better situation currently. The other one is it just really further fuels anti-Semitism when there's this notion that Jews have all this control over media and finance and Hollywood and politics, and now they're able to silence people speaking out against Israel. All it does is further enhance and flame anti-Semitic sentiment. So that would be another negative to this. But cool, we have two people coming on. I'm gonna bring you both on. We have Looking for Peace in All the Wrong Places. I love your name. And we have Duvid. Duvid, welcome back. We're going to give it first to Looking for Peace because they were on first. Introduce yourself with whatever information you like and share what's on your mind. And Duvid, you'll be next. I see you're driving, so just make sure you're safe. You don't need to look at the camera, look at the road. We could still hear you.
Thanks, Adar. This is Looking for Peace over here. Yeah, I'm a longtime fan, actually. I've been a subscriber as well. Hold on, some mic issues there. It's normal for me. You guys can still hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Sorry about that. And yeah, oh my gosh. Still good? Can you still hear me, Adar?
Yep, now I can, yep.
Okay. So yeah, I'm a longtime fan, obviously. Been watching the show for years. And when stuff like this flares up and starts impacting your life directly, you realize that, oh my gosh, it's not just, my family in Israel that I'm looking out for. I'm in Canada here, and I'm feeling on a day-to-day that the Jew hate is palpable. I'm like, I've never felt, in a sense, like a fog in my mind that all I can think about, every headline, everything I see, I know that Islamophobia exists. I know it's there. But 51% of all hate crimes in the U.S. are against Jews, which is 2% of the population. 51%, right? We're talking 6 times the amount of Islamophobia. And I'm not saying there's people who aren't, on that side as well. And it's terrible. It's awful. But like I'm telling my son, who's obviously Jewish as well, at 9 years old, to conceal his identity. Don't tell people you're Jewish. And he just like doesn't understand that. He has lots of friends. And I just see what's on TV right now. And every single headline, I can tell you what media channel is putting out a headline based on the sway of based on the sway. If it's NBC News, it's about the catastrophe in Gaza, which I hate to see. I don't want to see every single, children and women crying. It's terrible. And then if you go on Fox, it's about how we got a Hamas guy and how the IDF is, progressing, and these bombs are helping or whatever it is. And then you have your friends who kind of talk about it in the background and don't realize how much this means to you, and how you have literally family running all around the world, leaving Israel, jumping into bomb shelters.
Hi.
Was literally attacked, and they're hiding out, and they're hearing that other people got burnt alive, and they were hiding with their kids. And like, that could have been us, and now we're running. And I don't like living my day-to-day fog. And then I see YouTube, and I listen to some people I agree with on a lot of things. But then when it comes down to Israel, Kyle Kalinske, Crystal Ball, Cenk Uygur, forget Mohammed Hijab. He's got his own opinions on that. But I don't understand how they have this double standard with Israel, which it drives me absolutely crazy. They just go on and on about, hey, listen, in Adar, I love a two-state solution idea from an idealistic standpoint, but isn't it under 25% of the Palestinians actually want a two-state? What are we forcing this upon? Something that they don't even want. I don't even understand. Where are we? What are we even negotiating anymore? And the point we're just asking them, how about you just take it out of your charter, not to kill us all? We'll start from that, and then we can decide on countries and all that. People, after 9/11, did we ask the U.S. to go to the Taliban? Let's make a peace deal. Let's tell the Taliban everything's cool, and you got us on that one, but we really want peace. I don't understand these views right now. I'm really confused, and on both sides of the aisle in the States, I'm scared to death. I'm seeing, the left, let's not even get into that. But recently, Vivek Ramaswamy's kind of been switching a bit. Trump's been calling on Netanyahu and a bunch of stuff, the Soleimani stuff. He's saying it was all me. And he's called him kind of gutless in a sense. Ramaswamy's saying he's pulling aid from Israel unless they give him the whole plan post rooting out Hamas. Yeah, that's going to happen. After that, we got to know the full plan. Or he's going to cut aid, his exact words. It's like, so I just don't, I think back when I was younger, and I think about the Holocaust, and I'd say the Jews must have seen it coming. They must have heard the rumbling. They must have felt something going on before they got pulled out of their homes. And I don't know, man. I'm feeling those rumblings. I'm feeling it, and I don't know what to do about it. And it's scary as hell. So I go about, like, I work every day. I try to live my life normally, but I'm in a fog and I'm scared. And I don't know if people understand what I hear from my family in Israel. Every one of my family members in Israel, like my grandparents are dead already, but they're Holocaust survivors, and from the onset been in Israel. All my cousins, aunts, uncles, second cousins, kids, everyone has their story. Everyone knows someone that's dead or kid. I know, Adar, you know this. Everyone has these crazy stories of themselves, and they're all still living in fear. So I don't know what people, river to the sea. I don't know what that means to people. I don't know what right of return means to people. If we can give a country to what you think, I'm so confused. Does the world think that the Israelis are just, first of all, they must think we're evil because we just want to attack the Palestinians over and over again and just kill as many as possible. This is like the view I'm getting. And just like this whole thing's a sham that they're even doing something wrong. People are even denying the atrocities that Hamas committed, right? Aside from that, they think that we like sending our 18-year-olds and 17 to 18-year-old kids to like potentially get killed or like have PTSD for the rest of their lives and deal with this. This is fun for us. What is the benefit? Did they think that we're like, oh man, one day we'll just get Gaza to ourselves and we'll just go to the beach? Is that what they think we're going to like? I don't understand. I would love if Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem was Palestine and they were an amazing trading partner. And imagine they put their effort into things like the UAE does, tourism or whatever. And they put their efforts into, like Singapore. I don't want to steal the other people's lines, but if they were the Singapore of the Middle East, it would be amazing. We'd have an amazing trading partner. I don't know why people are convinced that we'd rather have this horrible relationship with these people living amongst it. Like it's unbelievable to me. They must think we're nuts or that they're nuts, or I don't even know anymore. And I'm just in a fog. I don't get it. I know what to think. I mean to ramble, but it's probably related to how long has it been? 18 days or so. I was camping with my son in the woods and people are telling me that this happened, so.
Yeah.
So I'll pause there. And
Hi.
Later on as well. So
thanks so much for sharing, Rami. We'll have you on in a moment. Dan.
Okay.
Sorry, not Rami. Just I'll call on you. Okay. So looking for peace. Thank you, man. Just about what you're going through. First of all, I'm sorry about that. I could imagine, living in Canada, as you mentioned, where it's meant to be, one of the safest places, and you feel, record levels of anti-Semitism. And, it's ironic because every time there's some kind of escalation of violence between Israel and Palestine, we see that Jews are indiscriminately attacked around the world, which is the greatest justification for the need of a Jewish state, right? So it's almost like people who are anti-Zionist want to make the case that Zionism isn't needed, and their way of doing that is by proving that it is needed because Jews are going to get indiscriminately attacked because of the actions of a government on the other side of the world. So it's, on one hand, very unfortunate that that's the case, but it's also ironic, and it proves the entire purpose of a Jewish state. In terms of, you mentioned that, what do we even do? 25% support a two-state solution. It's currently it's around 25%. During the Oslo Accords, it was closer to 50%, which still isn't enough because you only need, a minority of a population that's willing to engage in acts of violence to disrupt the peace process for them to be successful. So it's not that 50% is enough, but the point here is that if there's a path forward and Palestinians have hope, public opinion changes, right? So we often, look at the situation and say there's no way to have peace. Look at the population, look what they believe. But every single year, public opinion changes on different topics, and the opinion really changes based on environmental conditions. Who are their leaders? What have they experienced? How much hope does this population have? So, the young generation of Palestinians is the most radical, and the young generations of Israelis is the most radical. And that's not hard to understand why. The longer we've been fighting, the less hope we have. But just how a population can be radicalized, we could also de-radicalize. And again, this isn't an easy process. And many people, primarily Palestinians, because their daily life is considerably less comfortable than Israelis, they don't want to wait a generation. They want change now. And while I think there is a lot we could do to really improve the lives of Palestinians in the short term.
Can I ask you a quick question? So on the radicalization that you mentioned there?
Yeah, sure.
Where just your personal opinion, where do you think that lies with Israelis, that they're radical? They're like, we want all of Gaza, West Bank as ours, settlements everywhere, versus the Palestinians, which are radicalized and saying that Israel has no right to exist. They shouldn't be there. River to sea, they can jump in the sea first.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're going to compare the opinions of both populations, we will see some differences. I mean, there's quite a significant cultural difference between Israelis and Palestinians, and this will reflect on their views. Israelis being the ones with the upper hand for the past 100 years and have considerably better lives are going to be also less radical. So if we do like a one-for-one comparison, you're going to see that on average, Palestinians are more extreme and they support a greater level of violence towards the other side. But I don't think it should be too hard to understand how that came to be. Partially cultural, partially environmental. But the point I'm really trying to make is we see that there's a change in public opinion from year to year. So we need to ask ourselves, what can we do to change public opinion in a positive direction? So we have populations that are oriented towards peace, populations that are willing to live with one another. So if it went from 50% to 25% in terms of who supports two-state solution in two decades of regression, I think we could very easily get it back there. And I don't think it would take 2 decades. I think it's just about giving both populations hope, allowing Jews to feel like this solution will ensure their safety, and allow Palestinians to feel like maybe they won't have all the land, but they're going to have some form of justice and freedom. And over years of peace, they'll also have access to all the land because we're living side by side. That's in a two-state solution paradigm. Like there's other ways we could look at it with the Confederation, which might be more appealing to Israelis and Palestinians. But the whole idea is if people have something to believe in and they see that there's a path forward that will keep that on the Jewish side will keep them safe, and on the Palestinian side, which will make them free and give them justice, then I think you can get public opinion change relatively quickly. In terms of these people who you generally agree with them, how they're just, you feel like they're getting it all wrong on Israel-Palestine. I mean, people generally, it's such a popular topic that just for clicks and views, everyone needs to have an opinion. So you have people who never talk about Israel-Palestine, but now that's dominating the news cycle. So everybody wants to say something about it. It's often not coming from an informed place. It's often just needing to have an opinion in order to get exposure. But just to break down the two different ways people are looking at this, many people sympathize with Israelis saying, okay, yeah, you suffered a horrific attack. There's no justification for that. But that being said, that doesn't give you free reign to just bomb the shit out of Gaza and kill thousands of civilians, right? Like you have the power. You should have a better approach to dealing with this. I would go on and ask them what they think should be done. And I do have some ideas at alternative approaches, but most people just say, don't do that. And they don't really provide a better solution as to what Israel can do. So that's like one side on the one narrative of the left. The more extreme would say what Hamas didn't do is wrong. It's actually justified because you need violence against your oppressor is perfectly acceptable. And Israel doesn't even have the right to respond. They just need to end the siege on Gaza, end apartheid, whatever slogan they want to say that makes them feel like this will suddenly solve the conflict. So that's like generally speaking how people on the left are looking at it. They don't like seeing all these videos of dead babies. They don't like seeing the destruction, and they're sure there must be another way to do it. And then those who are pro-Israel on the more moderate side are saying, look, the destruction in Gaza is horrific, but war is horrific, and there's casualties in war. If we're able to not only does Israel have the right to defend themselves, but if they're able to defeat Hamas, and it's going to be for the greater good. And then on the more far side of the pro-Israel spectrum, you have people who just like have no problem to see massive amounts of Palestinians dead because they don't like them, you know. But so that's kind of what's informing people's narrative, like which side you give more consideration to is really dependent on that.
I'd push back on that last sample.
Sure.
I think the radical other end is that they want all Israelis dead. They want all Jews all around the world dead. To say that any Israeli wants all the Palestinians dead, that's ridiculous. That is so far extreme. That's the extreme of someone from Hamas saying, I want to kill every Jew all around the world, in my opinion.
Yeah,
so that is I think that's a very extreme opinion and a very minor opinion of Israel in general, especially people here in Canada, US. No one wants to kill every Palestinian. That's ridiculous. And if they do, it's a very minor amount of people. You can
I would agree with you that although during this escalation, I've seen the most calls for a total annihilation of Gaza, and they don't really care what happens to Gazans. I've seen this more than ever now. But I would certainly agree that there's on the far left, you're seeing something very similar, and to a greater extent that they just want to see Israel annihilated. And I'm going to go on to say it's not even necessarily that. It's not that they want all Israelis dead. It's that they want all Israelis gone, and many Israelis want all Palestinians gone. It's more so by any means necessary. Maybe we'd rather they just leave, but if us being safe requires them dying, rather choose us and our families over them and their families. And I think both sides have a similar sentiment. But again, we're trying to talk about two distinct narratives, but there's really like many different perspectives, right? There's like, what does the average Palestinian think? What does the average Israeli think? What does the average like pro-Israel person think who's not Israeli? What does the average pro-Palestinian think who's not Palestinian? So there's really many different things informing people's perspective on here, and some certainly more extreme than others. I tried to give like a more general understanding of why people fall into one camp over the other. And honestly, what I try to do, and it's sometimes easier said than done, I actually just try to ignore like all the shitty views, like all the people who, feel like they have something to say. Fuck them. Your opinion really isn't worth my time. I'm more interested in talking to people who actually have skin in the game and who can actually have a positive impact. And that said, there's certainly benefit to how the public views the situation, but we have limited emotional capacity, and we got to pick our battles. So that's how I look at it. Looking for peace. And any other? I do want to move on to other guests. You are welcome to stay on, but before we go on to other guests, anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, I'll definitely stay on. I do want to let the other guests speak as well, of course. I will say that Israel as a developed nation with a military. I've spoken to my cousins at length about this. If they walked up and just killed a Palestinian, they would go to freaking jail. If they do anything like that, there's moral, there's rules and regulations that they have to follow. And I'm not saying anecdotal bullshit doesn't happen, and that happens everywhere. But there's definitely not rules to say we have to kill as many Palestinians as possible. I know this for a fact on the inside. It's ridiculous to think that. And I definitely have heard that from a lot of the other side, whether it's the left or whatever it is, mentioning that Israel kills indiscriminately, doesn't care what happens. And, listen, I'm completely against collateral damage, but I do think Israel is going after military targets. Sadly, sometimes those targets happen to be in civilian areas, specifically potentially, churches, hospitals, and so on and so forth. I'm not saying Israel destroyed that. That's a whole different story. I'm not even getting into that. But regardless, I don't see the same people crying about the civilians in Dresden from the Holocaust when we were fighting the Germans. And to me, this is as genocidal as the Nazis. And in a sense, it's a little bit even scarier because they're proud of what they're doing. At least the Nazis were kind of hiding what they were doing. And really, let's be real. Hamas would kill us all. Hitler at least offered to send us away. Would Hamas send us away if they had the power to do that? I don't think so. So this is a little bit scarier, and Israel is kind of cornered. And I'm not saying that Israel has the right to destroy anything or, that they haven't made bad decisions. But I can't, consciously think that they are making purposefully bad decisions to kill as many civilians as possible, right? So I'll let everybody else talk, and I will listen and contribute.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts. David and Joseph, I see you're in the waiting room. We'll bring you on in a moment as well. David, what's going on, man?
Hey, Baruch Hashem, it caught me driving, so I'll be home in like 10 minutes. If maybe I can and then I'll sign off, and if you're still going, like 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah. You want to hop back on in 10? That's fine.
If I were to make a quick comment?
Sure.
Yes. I mean, we got in contact through, the alt-right and Adam Green. And when we did, I'd mentioned to you that I lost a lot of Jewish friends over Palestine, not too many over the alt-right. And, 2014, I was in University of Michigan, and I started going to Palestinian events like Jewish Voice for Peace. And I had grown up, kind of like secular humanist, like half Jew. And I saw like kids that I went to high school. So the woman organizing like BDS in Michigan was, a parent of a child that I went to high school with. And I think the concept just would be universal humanism. I don't know if you come from a universal humanistic background.
Yeah, I subscribe to that personally, yeah.
I mean, just say like there aren't good guys and bad guys. There's not something uniquely good about the Jews or bad about the Palestinians, and even Hamas. It's just like a universal humanistic nature. I mean, you could look at the rhetoric and just say, but like, no, whatever's driving Jews and driving Hamas is the same factors. And maybe just a thought to you, because we had met through people on the alt-right or countering anti-Semitism among whites, or in different strategy that I was largely ostracized for going to Palestinian events, and I found that the biggest hatred on the Jewish sides from people that never met a Palestinian. It was at University of Michigan that I got in touch and went to Palestinian events and understood their perspective. And the Orthodox Jews who I was part of then really just stopped trusting me. They felt their security was in danger, and that I was a traitor just for speaking to those people. And even liberal Jews become skeptical. Even like mainstream Democratic organizational Jews, were like, "Wow, like what are you doing going to those Palestinian events?" There's a handful, and you see even like Jewish Voice for Peace has been put on these lists as basically Hamas supporters. And it was in that vein that I got involved with the alt-right, so it's maybe a thought to you in terms of now looking back to your involvement with the alt-right or the Jewish Israeli view, and then to put it also from the alt-right perspective, say, well, does there have to be kind of a national divorce between the interest of Jews who want to remain in diaspora and Israel? And I know like my local liberal synagogue that was like Black Lives Matter and everything, now they went Zionist, and basically saying the same thing that your former guest was saying, like Hamas are bad and we're good, betraying the universal humanistic values. There's some Jews that are remaining the Jewish Voice for Peace, at least if not now, kind of intermediary that don't get involved with Palestinians. They're protesting, and maybe a push to say, like, no, man, that's your duty as a Jew to weather the anti-Semitism. Israel needs the support of America, and as American Jews, Israel does not support. I mean, I've argued this so many times, and everyone pushed back. But I say Israel does not support. America doesn't support Israel because it's in their best interest. America supports Israel because American Jews pressure and lobby them to. And although the narrative generally is you're not designed that way. So say you're an American Jew, weathering anti-Semitism is your duty, saying that America will not support Israel if American Jews don't pressure America to. And the price of doing that will be weathering anti-Semitism. So I might just sign off and listen to, because I'm driving, and maybe if you're still talking 20, 30 minutes, I'll try to join back.
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you stand for a moment, and I'd just be happy to share some thoughts regarding what you said. So you said that you feel like what driving Hamas and Israel are similar things, and I'm not quite sure I understand that. I think, we're definitely
universal humanism. They're saying that not they say if you're an American and you're a universal humanist, you're by definition required to think that it's the same motivations on both sides. There's not one good and bad side. That's a derivative of universal humanism. So you either have to give up on universal humanism, like I was a universal humanist till I saw this, and now I realize that there's evil in the world.
So the way I view it is universal humanism would be approaching this from the perspective that all life is of equal worth, and trying to find a solution that really abides by that principle. But that doesn't mean
the same motivating factors of human nature. I mean, saying there is no unique evil human nature. All humans have the same motivations. That it's universal.
Yeah, I would actually agree to that to an extent. I would say that most evil actions are committed by people who aren't evil. They're just either taught to hate or their experience caused them to hate another group of people. Like the same. Most people who either support or commit evil actions go home to their families and show them love and kindness and compassion. This is true. But I do think it is important to understand, we need to take it like one level above that and understand what is driving each side, because that helps us reach solutions. So, for example, if we understand that Jewish Israelis, their primary concern is security, and if we understand that Palestinians' primary concern is a sense of justice or equality, well, then that really helps us reach solutions. So I agree with you. We're all born innocent children, and our conditions make us who we are. But we also need to understand the needs, wants, and aspirations of each population to really reach solutions. So I don't think we're in disagreement. I would just add that as an important caveat. In terms of, Jewish support.
Can I disagree a little bit? So he made a comment about me saying Hamas bad, Israel good, or whatever. I'd push back saying that I don't think the motivations of, I guess, the final outcomes that Hamas and Israel are looking for are the same. I really don't. I feel like I don't know if you want to analyze Hamas and not listen to them or what they're saying, but I don't think Hamas at the end is going to have some sort of kumbaya outcome with the Jews and Israelis. And I also push back on the stage when people say, oh, that's something that Israel is dealing with. No, Hamas wants, if 100 Hamas militants, freedom fighters were flown into a different, let's say into North Carolina at some music festival, and the people are pushing, oh, you guys are freedom fighters from Gaza. I don't think it would turn out well for them. I think it would be a similar situation. I think it's just, they specifically, I would, agree with that earlier comment you're saying about, I think Hamas is after some evil goals and genocide of the Jews. And I don't think that's what Israel's after on the other side. So I wouldn't say they have the final outcome in this. I'd say the majority of Palestinians want to live in peace and live peaceful lives. But I don't think if you're fully following what Hamas wants, and I believe tons of people within Hamas probably just stuck within it as well and don't really want to kill every last person that's a Jew. But I do think that if they were following that credo, which is their credo, which is not old, then that's what they want to do. And I think that's as evil as it gets.
Thank you. And Duvi, just on your last point, which I don't want to get too deep on, you and I have already had a full live stream on the topic of anti-Semitism, which people can view. What do you search? I'll find a link and drop it in the chat. But just a thought on that. U.S. support for Israel is partially due to American Jews lobbying government. But if you were to remove that entirely, support for Israel, I don't even know how much it would change, because there's two other forces that I think are much more powerful than Jewish lobby. One is the military-industrial complex. So, 70% of the funding Israel gets from the United States needs to be used to purchase weapons from American weapons companies. That in itself is a lot of a reason. The defense industry itself would lobby to continue that funding going. The second is, as I mentioned earlier, U.S. foreign policy is really dependent on increasing their sphere of influence. Israel, in that regard, is an important ally It's a powerful Middle Eastern nation where they get a lot of technology from. There's a lot of weapons development there. They view Israel being strong as important to them maintaining a large sphere of influence around the world. And these two things are more powerful than the Jewish lobby. And even more so, if you look at the Jewish voting bloc, they're only significant in, I would say, maybe one state, which would be Florida. Yeah, there's more Jews in California and New York, and there's plenty in New Jersey, but those aren't swing states. So if you look at it in terms of votes, it's not really a large voting bloc. You could look at it as a large donor bloc. But you have a much larger voter bloc that's super Zionist, and that's evangelical Christians. I think they're the largest voter bloc in the country. So I don't even think it would move the needle that much. I do know anti-Semites. This is one of the reasons why they don't like Jews, because they view this powerful entity funneling American money to Israel and ensuring support. But I think that comes from really a shallow understanding of U.S. foreign policy and how the United States makes their decision. But I don't want to get stuck on this topic too long, just because it's not really Israel-Palestine related. But David, if you want, we could have another live stream dedicated to this.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate it. God bless, and you'll pray for peace. I've been saying, immediate de-escalation, and unfortunately, I've been in all Jewish circles. I was in Israel for a few years, and I know how Jews talk when it's just us around. And I think, I've came to, I guess, being anti-Zionist. I think Zionism is the problem. Because really it only ends with giving the Palestinian citizenship or expelling them. And intermediate of that, two-state solution possible, but you see an increasing pressure. Very few Jews want to give up on Zionism and absorb the Palestinians, and that's why you see increasing pressure for expulsion and even, God forbid, among the fringest element, even genocide, God forbid.
Cool. Thank you, David. Thanks for joining. Thanks for your thoughts. Hope to see you soon. We're now going to give it over to, is that Rami or Romy? How do you pronounce that?
It's Romy. It's like
Romy.
the city of Rome, but it has a Y at the end. So it's
Awesome.
like Romy.
Great to have you on. What's on
Thank
your mind?
you. Well, I think the main obstacle is just that we're so far from peace at the moment. I mean, like, the Palestinians never accept peace deals, and the Hamas just invaded Israel. So it's just like, that's not even really an option at the moment, is it? And the Palestinians continue to deny the Jews are indigenous to Judea. So it just doesn't seem like we're very near peace. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, I would definitely agree that we're not near peace. It seems like we're in many regards further than ever away, but we also need to come to terms with the reality of the situation. It's true that we could say we haven't had much of a partner for peace, and we've gotten at peak around 50% of Palestinians to agree to a Jewish state during Oslo, and that.
But they didn't accept the Yasser Arafat, didn't they? Did
Right,
they? That's
right.
the issue.
50% isn't enough, but the whole idea is we could see that given the right situation, Palestinians, a significant amount of them, can come to terms with some kind of a solution. But I'm not saying that there's a clear.
But the issue also.
Wait, Rami, real quick.
Terrorism may still continue.
Rami, I let you speak. Let me speak, and then you could respond.
Yes.
Okay? Cool. Now we need.
I think my phone glitched, so it sounded like you weren't talking.
Oh, okay. Well, it could be a lag. Yep. So the reality is that as challenging of a path to peace as we may have, 50% of the inhabitants living from the river to the sea are Palestinian. So this is a reality we need to accept, and we need to come to terms with this and understand that. And many would say it's time to get rid of the Palestinians and send them elsewhere. The chance of this happening is quite unlikely. So I think coming to terms with the fact that Palestinians aren't going anywhere, and they're 50% of the population, we need to continue to look for solutions, because we can't continue. We just can't continue like this. Even
Are
if
you talking about Israeli Palestinians, or are you talking about people in West Bank or Gaza? Like, send them where? Like, this is
if you include West Bank, Gaza, and Israeli Palestinian citizens of Israel, it's 50. It's around 50%. Yeah. So that's what, and it's for this reason why I don't support a binational state. I think it would be a disaster. I think it would be extremely bloody, and you'd have two populations who have so much fear, mistrust, and hate of one another, competing over control over one government and one military would be damn bloody. But the reality is we're living on this land together, so we can't stop looking for solutions, as hard as that may be, to imagine what that looks like. And what's for sure is, while we don't know exactly what the solution may be, if we're just going to be hopeless and believe that there is none, then our chance of reaching a solution is that much less. You've had nations fight for hundreds of years and then resolved conflict. Like there was a point in time where it would be hard to imagine France and Germany being allies. They were really they were enemies for 100+ years, and now we can't even imagine France and Germany fighting one another, right?
That's
So,
true.
so we need to understand that it's possible, and we need to be creative in looking for these solutions, and understand that every year public opinion changes, and it might take a generation or two, but there's certainly a path forward in which we could have the shared future together, whether it's two states, a confederation, one state, or anything in between. It's possible. It's all about having the will to do it, being creative enough, and making it happen. And again, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have all the answers. I certainly don't. I think if anybody had the answers, then we'd be in a different place. But it
Well,
starts
yeah.
acknowledging that there is a path forward and working towards it. But yeah, all you, Rami.
Well, I mean, I think you're right about the binational solution, because look at Yugoslavia. That's never worked, having multinational states. It always collapses and is worse than when it started, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would even say South Africa. Many people say like they want to compare Israel to South Africa, and I say, okay, well, so we learned we let's learn from South Africa and see that even their binational state has been disastrous for white people living there, and they're living there, and they're being murdered, and they're leaving, right? So
yeah, that's true.
The idea of having distinct populations who have been in conflict with one another now just kumbaya together, as much as the idealist in me says let's do that, it doesn't work. So let's be realistic and find better solutions.
I mean, what do you think about, someone said in the comments about how Palestinians deny that Jews are native to Israel? What do you think about that?
Yeah,
they wanted us to talk about it.
Yeah, I'll answer this, and then I do want to give Joseph an opportunity, and then and this is also free flowing, right? If somebody wants to chime in, feel free to. But so a lot of Palestinians, some of them acknowledge that Jews do come from the land, but a lot of them think that we're not the real Jews, that we're like, they kind of subscribe to the Khazar theory, and that we're just Europeans who are here as colonizers. I think one way we should look at this, there's a lot of conversation on who's indigenous, Israelis or Palestinians. Now, if you look at how indigeneity is defined, there's actually a few different definitions. And depending on which definition you use, you could actually see both populations as indigenous. Now, I think part of us having a shared future is building this kind of unified narrative. And I think it would be extremely helpful for both sides to stop trying to prove that they are indigenous and the other side isn't, to accept that both our people are indigenous to this land. And that's even more the reason why we should find a peaceful resolution. So I don't have a way to convince all Palestinians that we're indigenous, but I think one step is not deny their indigeneity, right? Many on the pro-Israel side say, oh, they're just Arab colonizers. And it's true, there was the Arab conquest, and that's why culturally Palestinians are, they speak Arabic, they're Muslim, they have a lot of Arab culture. Their DNA is quite mixed, including Jewish DNA. But I think it would just be helpful if we stop the competition on who the indigenous people are and say we're two distinct indigenous populations needing to find a way to share this land. So again, that won't solve the entire problem, but I think that's a good next step. Joseph, you want to chime in?
Sure. Yep. Okay, you can hear me, right? Okay. So I grew up a really strong Christian Zionist, and I had spent a month working in Israel and just got a good firsthand look and it was a organization for Christian Zionists working in the land and side by side with Jews and Christians together, and it was a really interesting trip, and in fact, we worked with the IDF to put up fences. I have here an authentic IDF jacket, and so as a souvenir. And so my take on this is there's a complicated mess, and it depends on where we start the conversation. I believe that we should start the conversation with the very untangling all of the secular versus religious motivations for Zionism and or Palestinian nationalism. So there's a lot of secular reasons for the existence of these states, and there's a lot of religious motivations for it. So and that's another layer. And in fact, in my opinion, I think that's the core issue. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's a very central point. But my initial response to this, when I first found out that this happened, I was a little confused about how they let it happen. That's just my first reaction. Maybe there's a lot of things that we don't know, but that is some of the conspiratorial thinking that you find out there. But sort of like how people looked at with 9/11, right? Like, oh, it was an inside job type of thing, right? I don't believe that. I think that there is a lot more that we don't know that was going on. But I was curious about what you thought about that or other things. Yeah, and another trying to piece it all together type of thing.
Yeah. So just first of all, like on it being both a religious and secular conflict, I agree. I certainly think, I personally think it's better to focus on concerns that are more universal because not everyone's religious. So some segment of the population thinks this is the land of the Jews because the Torah says so. But both secular and religious Israelis agree that it's essential for security and for Jews to be able to determine their destiny, right? And you could have both Palestinian and secular and religious Palestinians. They might not agree on religious components, but they're going to agree that they deserve justice and access to the whole land, or some kind of freedom and equality. So I think that the secular arguments are generally more universal, and that's why they're better to focus on because they don't create internal division. We could all agree on them. In terms of how this happened, at first, I think we were all shocked that this is really Israel's greatest intelligence blunder in our history. And I don't think they've done the full investigation, but we're starting to understand more of what happened. But just for one reason to say, to speak on the conspiracies, I think it's, people are very quick to reach the conclusion that conspiracies happen. And there's certainly conspiracies, people in general are always people in general do bad things. When these people happen to be in power and they try to hide it, that's essentially a conspiracy, right? So there's no reason to think that there aren't conspiracies taking place. The thing is, the more people need to be involved for a conspiracy to happen, the less likely that conspiracy is the less likely it is to be a conspiracy. So what do I mean by this? In order for Israel to intentionally allow this to happen, you would need many dozens of people to be in on it, including a bunch of 18, 19, and 20-year-old soldiers, many of them women, who aren't, they're not like, it's not like you can, they're going to be in on it. So let me, why did I say many of them women? So there's a unit that actually looks at, they're looking at screens all day, right? And those screens are cameras on the border. This is a unit that's almost entirely women. That's what they do. They're 18, 19, 20-year-old women that just look at screens. Could you imagine if a high-ranking officer comes to them and say, okay, guys, we're going to let Hamas in and don't tell anybody, right? Like the chance of that actually being true and the chance of them agreeing to it and not allowing that to leak is close to zero, right? So just based on that alone, you could assume that there's not some conspiracy here. Once more information came out, we saw that they were actually very sophisticated in this attack. So first of all, there were a few breaches of the fence, and it seems like they used a drone to. It involved some kind of a cyber attack, which actually stopped the cameras from working. Which we still don't have more information on that, but that's what some reports are showing. And when that happened, they also did a massive barrage of rockets, which got people in the area to be distracted by the barrage. And then there were a few points of the fence where they entered, but it seems like a significant amount of those who entered actually came through tunnels, which is very hard to track. So it seems like they actually just outsmarted Israel. They did something very sophisticated. We weren't expecting it. Now, if we want to get to any conspiratorial aspect, the one that I would potentially grant is Israel may have known, Egyptian intelligence knew something was coming. They warned Israel. U.S. intelligence said they knew something was coming. So it's fair to believe that Israeli intelligence also had information that there was some kind of an attack. It's possible they just thought, okay, go for it. We'll stop it. We know what we're doing. It won't happen. Or, and this is the conspiratorial aspect, it's possible that Bibi willfully turned a blind eye because he thought, you know what, it's not going to be that bad of an attack, but it'll give justification to strike Gaza, and that will help unify the country and end record levels of protests, right? That is the one conspiratorial aspect that I could see possible. But even that, it's unclear. It is when you get an intelligence report, is that Bibi responding to independently, or is it the general, or is it the Secretary of Defense? So it's unclear that it's even as simple as Bibi just wanting to turn a blind eye because it would be politically convenient for him. I just think Israel failed on an intelligence capacity, and we got outsmarted, and they were able to bring thousands of soldiers into Israel, and hopefully we're smarter next time.
Yeah. You gotta Occam's razor these things sometimes. If you had time, could I ask one more quick question?
Sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you respond? You may have already touched on this, but how do you respond when people say that Israel is violating international law? And what I would ask them, what law they're under, and what law has been violated.
Wait, sorry, one more time.
What international laws could be violated in this war? Like they're saying that both Palestine and Israel are violating international law.
Yeah. So I mean, so I'm not an expert in international law, but I do know the basics. Well, Hamas International violated international law with their attack. It's not against international law for them to attack soldiers, but the civilians that they killed, that is certainly against international law. A nation has the right to respond. So Israel bombing Gaza does not on its own violate international law, but there's an area of international law that is a bit subjective. It is, what is the collateral damage compared to what is the strategic military advantage? And here is where Israel, there is legitimate criticism. So Israel doesn't try to maximize civilian harm as many claim they do, right? The proof is actually in the numbers. Israel has dropped, for every death in Gaza, Israel drops 3 to 4 bombs, right? So imagine what it would require for 3 to 4 bombs. Wait, I'm hearing a lot of typing. Rami, that might be you. I'm going to mute you just because. Cool. So for every 3 to 4 bombs Israel drops on Gaza, 1 Gazan dies. Around half are combatants. You would need to think that that is in itself a feat of trying to reduce civilian harm. That being said, that doesn't clear Israel entirely. So Israel might, whenever they drop some kind of a bomb, there's a consideration they need to make, right? They might say, okay, we know that Hamas has rockets in this building. We know that there's a strategic advantage to destroying this building, but we also know that we'll probably lose a few dozen civilians. Israel in that sense might actually decide, let's go for it, right? There's a consideration of proportionality to what will be achieved by each airstrike. and Israel often makes decisions that will harm civilians, and it's unclear that there's a great strategic benefit to them doing so. And this is where, and after every wave of violence in Gaza, you have these NGOs that actually look at Israel's airstrikes and they conclude that they did violate international laws because they struck targets that didn't have great strategic benefits or didn't kill combatants, but did kill civilians, and intelligence, based on intelligence, they should have known that. So it's really a question of proportionality and what collateral damage Israel accepts as okay in order for their strategic goals. So that's generally how it's looked at. And then there's the use of white phosphorus gas, which it seems Israel has used, and it seems like there are videos of them using it. In this one, white phosphorus gas, for those who don't know, if it touches your skin, it burns your skin. So why would Israel drop it? Well, it happens to be very good for creating coverage. So, for example, let's say Israel wants to do some kind of a special ops operation in Gaza with one of their special force units, either to rescue hostages or to kill combatants. They may drop white phosphorus in order to create cover for the special operations unit, right? That would be their reason for wanting to use it. Yet, if it's falling on civilians and burning them, even if it's burning terrorists, that's not the way to. It's still like a cruel way to kill somebody. That's against international law as well. So those were, from my understanding, that's how both sides have been violating it. But I'm sure somebody who's really an expert on this can go into even more detail on it.
I appreciate it, and I appreciate the show. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, for sure, Joseph. Come back anytime. Justin, what's up? You want to chime in? And
Hey,
you're welcome to stay on if you want.
hey, Adar.
How's it going, brother?
It's going good. I mean, as good as it can be, considering the situation. Joseph, if I may answer Joseph's question about conspiracy theories, I don't think it takes a conspiracy theory to understand what happened and how it was successful, because we can look at policy, and policy can tell us why it happened. And for the past, I want to say maybe 10 to 12 years, we've had a policy, I would say Israel has had a policy to strengthen Hamas in Gaza and using their intermediaries in Qatar to funnel in money. This is known. This is not something that I'm pulling out of a bag. This is something Netanyahu has said. Smotrich has said that they are an asset. And the concept was a strong Hamas serves two purposes. It brings order to Gaza, and it separates the Palestinians from the West Bank. And this is in our interest, in Israeli interest. I shouldn't say our interest. It's in Israeli interest because, hey, if you have a Hamas-run Gaza and a PA in shambles in the West Bank, there's no peace partner. There's no way we can let these people have their own state or rule over themselves. We have, forever Greater Israel. So depending on Hamas to organize and become a governing authority rather than a liberation movement or a resistance movement or a terrorist, whatever you want to call them, whatever. This is what the notion has been. So let's take that to the fact that the border with Hamas-run Gaza was open. Because why? We have Israeli troops protecting cities, little towns in the West Bank with 1,000 people. We have soldiers in the West Bank that are protecting these little enclaves of settlements. And this is where we have. So why did it take the soldiers 2-3 days to respond to an attack by 1,500 people? So these are policy issues. They're not conspiracy issues. And this is the question Israelis have to ask to their own government. You're protecting settlers. You're protecting these settlers that are going on rampages, killing Palestinians, which has been going on for a long time before October 7th. But what about our own borders, the people who live in the center of the country, the people who live in the south? And what if Hezbollah had participated in that attack? How many Israelis do you think would have died? How many cities and towns would have been what you saw in the south of the country happen in the north? It would have been a disaster. And I was listening to Looking for Peace in all the wrong places, and I'm sorry to say this, but to say why is the territories become like a Singapore? Why isn't the areas? Why are they? Yes, they're not Singapore. You know, you cannot create a Singapore when you have a siege. And then you're going to say, well, in 2005, that's when the siege started. But the siege didn't start in 2005.
That's what I was going to say.
Go back to 2001 when Gazans were told, grow flowers and export them. Go back to 2000 and go back to 1997 when we had Oslo, and tomatoes from Gaza were more expensive in Nablus than tomatoes from Italy, because you can't have a thriving economy when you have no control over your borders, when you have a siege. And this is not Hamas Gaza. This is PA Gaza back in 1997. So, you know, you say, like, what's this? The policies that have been followed, where you have settlers moving into the West Bank from 200,000 back in when Oslo was first signed to 750,000 today, to places like Muzaffar Yatta, a city, a town of 1,400 Palestinians that was evacuated, I think, 3 years ago. So we have had this, and not before, and again, October 7th, even before October 7th, we had a town called Ain Rush evacuated. We have a city after October 7th that was evacuated called Wadi Asik, okay? And its whole town, not only were they evacuated, but Israeli settlers, and including soldiers, went into people's homes, rounded them up, beat them, and raped them, okay? There's signs that men were raped, okay? Sodomized. And this is what's happening. So this whole fantasy of this, oh, why isn't there a Singapore? It's not there. And the worst part is when Palestinians compare Hamas to some of these settler groups, we're called, oh, this is outrageous. Okay, I'm telling you right now, Ben Gavir and Ismail Haniyeh are the same shit. Yishai Fleischer, who lives in the West Bank, is Ismail Haniyeh. He is his alternate universe twin. But when I say this, I'm called an anti-Semite. When I say this, I'm saying, no, you're unreasonable. How dare you? History started October 7th. We have to forget everything, history, and focus on innocent Israelis were killed. In fact, the discussion would not be going on unless Israelis were killed. If it was 1,400 Palestinians who were killed, we'd talk for a little bit, but not to what we do now, where you have people in organizations being banned. Organizations, you have the United Nations Secretary General now asked to be resigned because he dare compare the innocent lives of Palestinians to those innocents of Israelis. So there's no comparison because we're not allowed to compare. A Palestinian life is not worth it what an Israeli life is. And this is the problem. And here's the thing. You have to go back to Rabin, what Rabin said when they asked him why.
Before you get too far down the line, can I just kind of...
Let me just finish my last point. My last point. Rabin was asked, it was in Time magazine, I believe it was in 1995 or 96, right before he was assassinated. They said, you know, he was a general his whole life. He was a warrior. And he asked, why now? Why did you decide to make peace with these people? And he said, in my old age, and I'm paraphrasing him, he said, in my old age, I realized something. No matter what we threw at the Palestinians, through wars and occupations and the intifadas and stuff, I realized something. These people are not going to give up. And I'm telling you right now, as a Palestinian,
I agree.
No solution that is less than what we deserve. No two-state solution that's going to leave us at the mercy of Israel, where our borders are not controlled, where we're not allowed to be free like every other person is in the world. No solution is acceptable. Someone mentioned the Arafat proposal. Nobody would accept that. And Yasser Arafat said it, I am not a slave. And this is the thing. We will not accept anything. We are not meant to live under conditions subhumans so that Jews can feel comfortable in a homeland. And, you know, if Jews want a homeland, fine. Don't expect me to understand and appreciate that. Let me live my life, make peace with me, and then maybe I will learn about your situation and appreciate who you guys are and maybe understand that you are indigenous. I only understood how Jews feel about being indigenous in the land only when I got to know them, only when I made peace with them and met people like Adar, okay, who educated me on his story. But you cannot expect Palestinians that live under occupation to learn this, because all they know is Israeli soldiers, all they know is Israeli policy. That is basically a foot on their neck.
Yeah, I don't disagree with those comments. A lot of them are
looking for peace.
Go ahead.
Real quick. I will give you an opportunity to respond. But just then, some people are asking for the source of the claim about Bibi bolstering up Hamas. I actually saw an article shared, but if while while looking for peace is responding, if you can find that source, and also the source that Palestinians were sodomized is something that I've personally never heard. So if you have a source for that, please share that.
And Times of Israel, look under Times of Israel. There was an article, and these are being investigated now. If you look at, for example, Yossi Cohen's visit, Lieberman, Avigdor Lieberman. Okay,
Justin, we're gonna post it in the chat for everybody. So send it to me on WhatsApp, and then I'll post it. And one last thing, just to the comments are actually by and large respectful, but Scarlett, I need to call you out here because everyone here is acting quite respectfully, and you're just constantly throwing out insults and being mean. And you mentioned that Justin, who happens to be a moderator of our Discord server. For those who are interested, we have this Discord server where Israelis and Palestinians engage in conversation. So Scarlett, you mentioned that you're upset that Justin silenced you for being Jewish, but that's not why you were silenced. I've known you for a few years, not personally, but almost.
Who is that? Who is that? I'm not reading the comments. Who is that?
Scarlett. Almost every comment I've ever seen from you, Scarlett, it sounds like you're yelling. You engage in personal attacks. You're constantly very angry, and perhaps the anger is justified. But this has nothing to do with you being Jewish. It has to do with your inability to engage on this topic respectfully. So I'm going to ask you to reflect on that. If you want people to listen to you, if you want people to hear you, and if you don't want to get silenced in these chats, you're going to change the way you approach it. And if you continue to hurl insults in chat here, I'm just going to mute you. Cool. Looking for peace. So Scarlett's saying, she's correcting me that she said she was silenced for being Israeli and not Jewish, and then she says, obviously you don't know how to read, just to give you an understanding of how she engages, right? Obviously I don't know how to read. Cool. Looking for peace, all you.
Yeah, listen, Justin, I feel your pain, man, and when I mentioned I agree with your comments, I do not agree with all your comments, that's for sure. I agree with your comments that I don't believe that Palestinians, they shouldn't give up their fight, for determinism. And so I'm fully with you on that. I will say that we had a comment earlier, I believe it was Joseph that mentioned, we got into the, in military industrial complex and how potentially Israel has this nefarious plan to keep on dropping the bombs because of that. And, listen, that's a whole other deal. But I do think when it comes to leadership, when it comes to PLO, when it comes to Hamas, they have a lot of motivation for not signing any deals. You know how rich these people are? The tap is on. And when you're saying, oh, they can't make this Singapore, they can't. If they used all their energy, instead of using the billions and billions, they have great trading partners in the area, rather than the Jews have when we came to Israel. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Okay, let me explain to you.
Hold on. Sorry, go ahead.
Mahmoud Abbas said this in 2014. He said Hamas's mission, Mahmoud Abbas, who's the president of the Palestinian Authority, said, and it was even on Memory, they put Memory, which is an Israeli propaganda news channel, even presented this today. In a speech by Mahmoud Abbas, he said in 2014, Hamas's goal is to stay in power, and Israel has enabled this. And this is the problem. Hamas is enabled and in power because Israel has permitted money from Qatar, and at the same time, they destabilized the Palestinian Authority. They destabilized them, and they made the West Bank weaker while at the same time strengthening Hamas. What is the motivation? That's when we can talk about conspiracies. But I will just say to you facts, and these are facts.
Well,
and I put the articles in the
kicking
chat.
himself for the deals that he could have signed back in the day. I believe it was Olmer gave him the a pretty golden deal. I think it was over 90% of all the territories, a super highway to be built between Gaza and the West Bank. Hold on. And then all the funding. And then
where was the map? Where was the map that was presented on a napkin? Did you hear about the napkin?
Can I get that hand drawn?
This is propaganda, man. This is propaganda.
Justin, let him finish, and then you can share.
It just all I'm saying, yes. He drew. I heard that whole story about a map being drawn by hand, and Olmert saying, "Listen, I want to get you the real map," and then they never met again. And all I'm saying is, Justin, I feel your pain. And if your people are starving and you're living in a, what do you guys call it, a concentration camp that we don't know how to kill people in, or whatever you guys want to say, that's ridiculous, because he could have signed a deal and ended it right there and then. If it's got a hand-drawn map, if he wants all your people to for decades and decades. It's ridiculous. It sounded like a good deal to me, and I'm dying for a peace deal. And I'll tell you this, that when like my uncles were also gassed in the Holocaust, right? And we didn't get any deals. We didn't get any maps. We didn't get any nothing. Okay. So I understand your pain. I understand. And I know people don't like, for some reason, the Jews to resort back to the Holocaust for the reason why we feel like we need protection. But that's my uncles. If you guys have uncles, at 5 years old, they were thrown in a gas chamber. So that's very, very personal to me. And now when I hear people in Sydney screaming, gas the Jews, the day of a massacre of the Jews, am I supposed to say, oh man, let's, make sure that we have open borders and blah, blah, blah. Guess what, man? When I go to the United States, I have no criminal record and they search the crap out of me. And if I had a bomb on me or a big knife, they're grabbing me, man, the exact same way. And guess what? There are people in Gaza that want to bring weapons and hurt Israelis. And I think you could agree with that. And there's going to be checkpoints regardless. If I go to any country in the world, if I go to freaking Alberta, in my own country, they're searching me down. You know what? I don't know why I get chosen all the time for that, but I'm just saying there is going to be some sort of security that Israelis have to feel. And I would love if we had a kumbaya back and forth. I'm happy with that. I'm going for that. I'll give you your I was going to ask Joseph before about he was mentioning the whole, secular versus the religious aspect of it. And Adar, I'd love your thoughts on this actually. What if, the world's like, enough of this? This is a bunch of BS. We can't make a decision. Let's just impose a two-state solution. And I think Cenk Uygur was screaming at Piers Morgan about this, about build a giant wall and two-state solution. And I'm like, is he saying this for the Palestinian? And I know that, Justin, you do not agree with that whatsoever. Obviously then there would still have to be some sort of border protection as there is with every sovereign nation. Especially,
but let me explain to you something. I don't know if you've been to the country, but like I live in a city that's on the that like I can see the wall from my window. Okay, I live in a city in North Jerusalem.
From the other side.
The wall that exists doesn't separate Israelis from Palestinians. It separates Palestinians from Palestinians. Okay, first of all, I want to say hello to my friend Zohar. Zohar, it's nice to see you, brother.
Yeah, Zohar, we'll have you on in a moment.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Zohar. I'm gonna shut up in just a second. Anyways, so my point is that the issue. Listen. I have a neighbor that I can't stand. He parks in front of my house. He makes me sick. Okay, I wish he would move, but I'm stuck with him. I can't. He owns his house. I own my house. I want to build a fence, and I don't want to see his face. But guess what? My fence is going to be on the line, the border line, not through his kitchen, and he has to go get my permission to go from his bedroom to the living room. He has to fill out what is it? Monastic. What's the app for the Israeli for Palestinians to get the tasrih? It's called Monastic. Okay. Let me explain to you something very personal. My wife, because we got married before the wall, lives on the other side of the wall. So guess what? My kids, I have to smuggle them. My little kid has to sit in the back seat. Okay, now I'm getting myself into trouble right now. My kid sits in the back seat of the car so they can come to their house. Okay, I'm not living in West Jerusalem. I'm not living even in the 48 territories. I'm living in an occupied area in East Jerusalem. So these walls, these border checks, I'm okay. If Israel wants to surround themselves with walls and border checks and stuff, I'm okay with that. Just do it on your own land. Do it on your turf. Not between my house and my kids, where my kids are, or where my wife is, or where her family is. That's all I'm saying. So that's the way you have to look at it when you say such things.
I'm with you, and I feel that Israelis, if you had your own sovereign nation, that we wouldn't be just allowed to pass in there. They'd have to have checkpoints on their side as well. I'm fully with that.
But when you mentioned the Omer plan, did you take this into consideration? Did you take into consideration the areas where Palestinians live? Did you take into consideration the walls, how they're going to be connected? Did you? And when see, this is the thing. Yeah, it looks nice on a napkin, but what about when it comes down to the ground reality? Families have been
a hell of a lot better than what we have right now, man.
Well, guess what? Better? No, it's not better. It's not better because there's something called, and this is why you don't understand Palestinians. Palestinians are not going to accept something that is subhuman. Do you understand our perspective?
How is building a super highway and providing you with billions of dollars of funding and being a trading partner subhuman?
Habibi, I just gave you a concrete example. How do you expect me to live in a place where I'm going to be surrounded by a wall and separated from my family and from my home? How? Would you accept it?
So if I may chime in, and then we'll give it to Zohar, but Justin, it sounds like what you're saying essentially is that most Palestinians just won't agree to any two-state solution.
No, they will. They will. I'm not saying that at all. But it has to be a two-state solution means two states. not a state and a half. There's a difference
The
between
Olmert plan had
two-state
a
solution.
superhighway built between the West Bank and Gaza. Listen,
I'm not
this is-
talking. Habibi. I'm
I
not talking
understand
about
that'd be a
Gaza
good
and West
plan.
Bank. I'm talking about West Bank and West Bank. I'm talking
Right.
about going from
So-
East Jerusalem to
So,
Colombia.
so essentially what you're talking about, you're saying they would agree to two states, but they're not going to agree to a state that has checkpoints within it, and those checkpoints within it would be necessary
100%.
to
Yeah.
keep Jews living in what the
Yes.
state would be safe.
And
Justin,
let
question
me
for
tell
you.
you, more than 50%.
Good
Hold on.
question, Justin.
More than
Just a quick question
50%
about that.
supported this. If you go back to the
I
few
don't
weeks
listen,
ago,
let's get rid of those checkpoints. I
hold
want
on,
to give you a scenario.
let me just answer. Let me answer Adar.
Sure.
In 972 magazine just did an interview with Hanan Ashrawi. Hanan Ashrawi was one of the negotiators before Oslo at the Madrid conference after the Gulf War. And Hanan Ashrawi said something very important. She said, while we were negotiating and talking with Israelis in Madrid, this was right after the Gulf War, before Oslo, I think 1991. She said we would go back to the West Bank and have town hall meetings. 87% of the Palestinian population were behind her and her negotiating team for the two-state solution, and that was what was going on. And let me say, this was the years when Hamas was still not even, was just being coming up. They were founded in 1988, so this is about 3-4 years after Hamas. So 87%. Why the two-state solution is being rejected by Palestinians is not because it's a two-state solution. It's the kind of two-state solution that's being presented.
So you're saying there was a two-state solution that was supported by 87%.
There always is, and there still is. But
So
it's not a two-state solution. It's the kind of two-state solution.
Okay.
If you say
You have that
two-state
map? Can we see
solution
that
map?
without Jerusalem, without borders, without
No,
this,
So, Justin,
Yeah.
First of all, it's just another claim that I'm going to ask you for a source on, but I have a feeling that the two-state solution you're now describing is going back to 48 borders. It sounds like
no, not at all.
okay. Well, so I'd be interested in seeing, because from what I understood, the highest support the two-state solution ever had was around 50%, and that was during Oslo Accords.
But again, you're asking the question, Adar, that many people say: do you support a two-state solution? But again, you ever hear the expression "the devil is in the details"? So let's say
I want to talk to you about what I view an important compromise to make is, because this is going to be essential to any solution. Palestinians are going to need to come to terms with the fact that Jews are not going to put themselves in a situation where they don't feel like they can control their destiny and keep themselves safe. Now, here's the problem. Here's the challenge. Jewish security measures comes at the expense of Palestinian freedom. This is unfortunate, but it's very true. Jews having the power now are not going to consent to anything that puts them in danger. So if we want to make progress, we need to understand the existence of this dynamic. And if it comes to Palestinians making a concession that they don't get quite the two-state solution they want, but over time are granted more rights and more freedoms given years of peace, that's probably a more pragmatic solution, right? So let me give you an example. Right now, if Jews are living in the West Bank, let's just say we have the entire West Bank is Palestine, right? You have 500,000 settlers living there. One solution would be to uproot them and bring them into Israel proper. It would be bloody because they're heavily armed and very ideologically driven. Also, why can't Jews live in Palestine if Palestinians can live in Israel? But one option would be to remove them. The other would be to keep them there. Most likely, they will not be safe without Israeli security. They just won't. So in order for them to be safe, that would require some security presence in Palestine. That would require checkpoints. Mm-hmm. So for Palestinians to say, I'm not going to agree to any solution that has a checkpoint would be essentially allowing pride to get in the way of progress. But we could very easily see a situation where phase one of the solution is very limited military presence that keeps settlements safe. And then let's say after a decade where we're not killing one another, cool, no more checkpoints because there's no need for them, right? So it's almost about accepting that we both need to make concessions and that the longer we have peace, the better our conditions can be. if we have a two-state solution, I would want Palestinians to be able to travel to any part of the land without even a checkpoint, kind of like you have in Europe. You don't need a passport. You don't need a visa. They could travel to any part of the land and vice versa. That's the dream, right? But that's not
But-
going to happen from day one.
But
For
you're
day one,
missing.
we need to accept to something a little bit less
You're
appealing.
denying something. You're
Yeah.
not denying it. You're mislooking something. That was the concept of Oslo. Oslo was supposed to be a 5-year period that would evolve into 2 states, correct?
Correct.
And during Oslo, when Oslo first started, there was 200,000 settlers in the West Bank. Today, there are over 750. So you're saying, oh, well, we need a transition period. You know what a transition period means? A transition period, my definition for Palestinian, means Israeli settlers are going to be this. Ariel Sharon, when Rabin and Shimon Peres returned from the United States after he signed the Oslo Accord, you know what Ariel Sharon said to the settlers? Grab every hilltop you can. Build while they talk. And this has been Israel's mistake from the beginning. People like Gideon Levy, who is a leftist, and many people laugh at him. He was a supporter of the two-state solution, and he is no longer part of the two-state solution because and I asked him why, by the way. I had a pleasant meeting with him in Zoom, and I asked him, and he said the reason why is because Israel never intended on a two-state solution. It was just to buy time to move in the settlers. And Zohar is nodding. He's approving. Because so what you're saying, you're right, Adar. What you're saying is absolutely right. We're not going to go, bam, Palestinian state going to control its borders and stuff. We gave a transitional period, but Palestinians like me fear something called transitional period because guess what? Transitional periods include more settlers, more rampages, more Palestinians being moved from area C to area B and A, and a consolidation of Israeli control on 60% of the West Bank.
But just then we need to acknowledge that it would be very hard for Israel to justify moving settlers into the West Bank if Oslo wasn't responded to by suicide bombings on.
It wasn't. No. From 93 from 93, you had in 96 you had a little bit of period until Netanyahu got elected and it went back quiet, and all the way. If you look at the chart, I have a chart of murder and killing from terrorism. If you look at the 90s, it was, and I lived in Jerusalem during the 90s. It was a very quiet time. So it wasn't that. It was only when it was clear that settlers were going to continue, Israel was going to continue and deny, and this is when you had violence occur.
Can I present the question real quick?
Sure.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. It's horrible we have to meet on these circumstances, but it's always a pleasure to see all these great minds converse and keep it amicable in these horrible times. About the security question and Oslo and these things, if Israel or Israelis are concerned about their security, why are they expanding settlements within Palestinian territory? Isn't it the most dangerous place in the world for Jews to be if they are scared of their non-Jews around them?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I will give you a response to that. So Jews living in the West Bank, they're not driven primarily by their own personal security needs. They're very ideologically driven. Okay, and support for Jews to have access to the entire land is popular amongst a large segment of the Jewish voter base in Israel. So it's not that everything Israel does is for security. A lot of it is driven by ideology, poor ideology at that. But that doesn't take away the fundamental need that 100% of Jews feel for security. So somebody asked me, it was actually Joseph who was on the chat. He said, what's the difference between like religious ideology that's feeling conflict and then secular ideology? And my response was, we should focus on the secular stuff much more because those are universal, right? So you have Jews living in Tel Aviv and Jews living in the West Bank. They differ significantly in what they believe. One would say, this entire land is ours, God said so, and we should be able to live here. The Jew in Tel Aviv would say, you living there is just getting in the way of peace. But what they could both agree on is Israel is needed for Jewish safety. So I would agree with you. I don't think Jews living in the West Bank keeps Jews safe. I think it puts the Jews living there in danger. But most of the policies that Israelis agree on if you really get to the bottom of it, it's not religious ideology, it's security. And we could go one by one. So end the siege on Gaza, right? But if Hamas's only goal was to end the siege, then Israel wouldn't have much of an issue with it. It's that they fear that Hamas wants to destroy all of Israel. Ending the siege would just allow them to be more powerful. If it's ending the occupation, most Jews don't want to end the occupation, not because they say God gave them that land. It's because they don't want Hamas to be in power in the West Bank and have more access to shoot rockets on all of Israel. If you say, why not just end apartheid and have it be a binational state? Again, because Jews feel like that would end them up dead. So there's a lot of variation as to on Jewish opinion and what drives them. But what there's a consensus amongst 90+% of Jews living on the land is that the policies, a lot of the policies that are actually causing a lot of harm to Palestinians, we need them to be safe. And that's a challenge. Our safety comes at the expense of their freedom.
Thank you for that. So this is why I struggle, because on the one hand, and by the way, I'm well familiar with the need for Jews to feel secure. In my view, if I say I only trust other Jews for my security, I don't trust non-Jews, that's a bit racist. I know. When I go to the doctor in Israel, I don't care if it's a Palestinian, Arab, or a Christian doctor or a Jewish doctor. I trust them with my life. And I have the same sense of security when there's a Bedouin cop or a soldier. I don't feel any difference in my security because the person is not Jewish. Some parts in our society do feel this way, which is very, very unfortunate. It's something that I think that we should address if we ever dream about the possibility of a liberal democracy in the Middle East. Now, if we say that we want our security, meaning we do not trust non-Jews with our security, we have to be in a Jewish majority country, the expansion and allowing for ideologically driven people to settle in places that are more dangerous to them and place our soldiers in danger, I don't think it adds to our security in any kind of way. That's for one. Second, when it comes to the Israeli opinion about what should be done, unfortunately, as you might know, Netanyahu captured a lot of the public opinion and twisted it in a way that in the past we were for some kind of settlement during the Oslo Accords, and after the assassination of Rabin, his rise to power, the rise of Sharon and others, we suddenly became a more right-wing, anti-Palestinian, do not trust anyone. The Hamas is an asset. The PA is a burden to us, as Smotrich is quoted saying. We chose to weaken the secular, peace-seeking, non-violent part of the Palestinians in favor of expanding our settlements. With this, we also funneled money through Qatar to the Hamas and strengthened them, hoping that they would just stay at bay without just endangering us too much. 4 years, this has been the policy of Benjamin Netanyahu, and recent events prove that it has failed miserably in protecting Israelis. If anything, the idea that a military solution of any kind, if we just put on higher walls, get bigger guns, separate more people, have more surveillance, will lead us to a more secure future is just wrong. It's not me saying it, it's the 6 heads of the Israeli Shin Bet that were interviewed in the Gatekeepers documentary of Dror Moreh, the Israeli documentary, if anyone has not watched it. All generals admit there is no military solution to that. It has to be a political solution that provides the Palestinian with an idea that they live among equals with their fellow Jewish citizens and will not be incited or fall into the despair of choosing violence. That will be the perfect solution to get us out of this mess, in my view.
Thank you, Zohar. I'll make one comment, and then I know.
Can I just thank Zohar for agreeing exactly what I said? But he's just so much more articulate than me. I mean, seriously, I love you being here, man. Thank you.
I actually thought you guys both did a good job explaining yourselves.
Yeah, but he's much more well spoken than me. Come on.
Far too kind, man.
So, looking for peace would also like to make a comment, but I just, I want to push back on the idea that Jews thinking only other Jews will protect them is racist. I think it's not really looking at this the right way. I think it's more so a state whose intention of protecting Jews is going to be more trustworthy than a state that doesn't prioritize Jews. Now, obviously, the need of this state is a result of thousands of years of trauma and persecution. In an ideal world, a state like this shouldn't need to exist, where one group is prioritized over the other. But I'm not dealing with idealism. I'm trying to deal with reality. The reality of the situation is that most Jews alive today, given their history, feel that there's an importance for there to be a state that prioritizes their security and their safety. And now, as we see, with this escalation of violence, Jews are being indiscriminately attacked around the world for the actions of a government on the other side of the world, further strengthening the notion that maybe it's good that there's a state that prioritizes them. So I don't view it as racism. I actually view it as a very natural result of history. And I would say the same for any other group. If Palestinians wanting a state that can prioritize Palestinians, go for it. I think people should have that right to be protected in a nation. And in an ideal world, we don't need that. We don't even need states or borders. But I'm trying to work within the realm of possible and where we currently are at, not what I think we can one day achieve.
Adar, do you know of a country where Jews, Muslims, Christians, Buddhists, Sikhs, all the different kinds live somewhat more peacefully with each other?
Yeah, the United States. But
that's a reality, right? That's not a dream. A country that exists. Also, I live here in Europe. There's a Jewish community. There's a Muslim community. Whole kinds of communities.
Yeah, but Zara, but the truth is that Jews are now facing unprecedented amount of anti-Semitic attacks in these countries, and a lot of them are moving to Israel, even given the situation. And we can't only look at something in a short time frame, because you had periods before the Holocaust where Jews in Germany, that you had Jews who were members of the Nazi Party. So things can seemingly be good and then be bad. Now, and again, wait, hold on. You could even have a situation where Israel's nuked and Israel's the most dangerous place on earth to be a Jew. That's also possible. It's more about feeling in control of your destiny, right? Your well-being can't only be measured by having a home and having freedom and being equal. Like it's more so about knowing that you are protected and you have a government that will protect you in time of need. And that feeling that Jews control their destiny is really what drives a lot of Zionism. It's not just that, there are currently right now, you're probably at more risk being Jew in Israel than any place else. But you do have a government that's dedicated to keeping Jews there safe, whereas other countries don't have that priority. So it might not even be rational, but it's understandable why humans reach this conclusion. They want to live in a nation that prioritizes them.
If I may, for a second. One, half of the Jewish population lives abroad. So it's not a question of if or feel or we think. Some Jews, as they described in some place in another documentary that I had, have Israel as a safety net. In case something bad happens, they have that. Now, I don't know of any other minority in the world that can say that if things don't go well for them, they have their own country where they prioritize their bloodline. It's a little bit weird. Again, I understand that. I will never say that Israel should not have a right of return for Jewish people in need that are in danger. I don't think that this condition disqualifies the idea of a binational state. I just don't see it. I also see Israelis that are running away from Israel right now because it is really dangerous to be a Jewish person in Israel right now. If you want to look at the records, who's more coming in more or going out more, it's tough statistics. But again, the idea of raising kids in Israel, sending them to the army, if I can live in another country where they won't have to do any of that, I think that's a bit safer.
Yeah.
Until they're coming for you. So I am terrified, man. And so it goes through my mind. I'm sitting here in Canada watching the racism all around me like it's nothing. And you're saying that the Jews are racist. We are scared to death of the others. They're racist of us. We are rats to many people. This is like a common thread that we want to be genocided by Hamas leadership in Gaza. So I don't understand how it's our racism. The security that we feel is so low in so many places. I don't know where to run. I want to run to Israel because I feel like my neighbor. Okay, when after October 7th, what did they call for that one Friday or whatever it was? And I know my name is on the synagogue list, and I'm like, God damn, are some like crazy fanatics going to run into the synagogue, find my name, find my home, and kill me and my family because I'm Jewish? I'm like, I'm saying that, you know, they could do that. Do you think it went through my mind to find a mosque and to like, not even for half a freaking second? It's two different things. I'm scared, man. I'm scared. For you to say that we don't want security, and say, oh, I would want to be the army, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's ridiculous to say because I feel worried that my people are going to be genocided if we don't stand up for who we are. This happened the last generation. I'm not talking about 200 years ago slavery or the Spanish Inquisition, or this was you weren't here. I mentioned my uncles were gassed by the Nazis. And the same rhetoric comes up again in my generation, right after. And for you to say that we shouldn't be worried about dealing with, you know, who's this person? We should be, you know, a little bit worried about what their motives are when what's the support for Hamas in Gaza, which is, I'm sure it's bullshit, but it's 60+% of people want genocide. Like this is, and you're like, let's just and you said yourself, okay, where are places in the world that are the best places to live, where everyone can live together, honky-dory, right? I would say that in Israel, we have that. We're very close to that. There's a lot of Israeli. Listen, I know that's crazy because the guys on the outside are making it seem mad. But the Israeli Palestinians and people in Gaza who come to Israel to work, and people who love Israelis and Israelis who love Palestinians, this exists. This exists. There are more Israeli Palestinian, you know, people interacting with each other within Israel in a good way, I'd say, and in a bad way. But the news is not depicted that way. And why do people from Gaza want to cross into Israel to work? And why do they hire them? And I think on a general person-to-person level, this could work. I don't know if the 100 millionaire Mahmoud Abbas has the right intentions in mind for everybody in the long run. He's a freaking huge millionaire and his people are starving. So right away, you know, and listen, I'm sure there's something going on the other side as well. Both sides are not coming together from a diplomatic political level. I don't think that's happening anytime soon, but I think person to person, it could happen, but it can't happen with people thinking that it's us being racist when the world is literally calling for the gassing of the Jews. Okay, there's protests all around the world. And I mentioned, I don't like to mention stats again, but Zohar, I think you weren't on. In the United States, the place that you say is just a great place for everyone to live together, which is, first of all, that's not true. But regardless, 51% of the hate crimes are committed on 2% of the population, the Jews. And for you to say, I don't really understand why they need to have their own homeland where they feel safe, blah, 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 blah. That's why we're scared. People are racist. They don't like us. I don't know why. It seems like the Nazis were doing it, and now we got genocidal people screaming it from the hills, and then we have people supporting them. Our blood is still like freaking wet on the ground, and people are, you know, chanting in the streets to kill more of us. It's backwards to me for you to think that we shouldn't feel a little bit insecure after they chopped off babies' heads, and we're supposed to say, let's be all honky-dory with this and live together and open the borders or whatever. I don't understand. And then you're wondering why the Israeli government's push towards more right-wing thoughts when this is it counteracts each other. If Hamas is claiming genocide and and I think it was a mistake that they thought maybe Hamas is calming down. A couple of years, it's calm. Okay, Hamas might be changing, you know, and I do think that if they pulled all the settlements out of the West Bank without having some sort of like great deal in place, that it would be another hub of terrorism for them to launch weapons from, where Iran would be like, this is amazing. Let's get some money into there. And then we have the North, we'd have the West Bank in the center, we'd have Gaza from the South. And as a Jew, I am worried about that. So for you to say, it's, you know, this is breakdown of the walls and blah, 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 I'm in for that. After World War II, Japan was kamikazing themselves into, you know, American ships. It was crazy. They weren't going to give up. And they dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. Horrible. Unbelievable. They incinerated these people. Japan's like, we're done. We are done. We want peace no matter what. We don't want you to keep on flattening cities. No matter what, let's have peace. What they decided to do is demilitarize completely. Let's just drop the military And now Japan is one of the world leaders. They became one of the top countries. They deal with everybody. They actually do have military now. Everything's cool. Zohar, Justin, would it be at all in the benefit of the Palestinian people to say, Israel, we are putting down our guns. We are going to go like completely demilitarized. You're attacking defenseless. We're not going to try anymore to attack you. Please, let's have a deal. I know, Justin, you're just like, no, forget it because, but I think that we would remove the checkpoints. If you're demilitarized, we have no reason. We have no reason to have the checkpoints. I would love to have a kumbaya state. And if you guys think that Israel would still be doing like,
can I ask you something?
Can I ask you something? All that.
If you're not even familiar, you're not even familiar with the political reality. Okay, look at the West Bank. Does Hamas rule the West Bank?
No, of course not.
So if your theory, if there wasn't no terrorist organization ruling,
no, I'm just giving it as a parallel that would turn into a terrorist state.
I'm just telling you, we've given the Palestinians has given Israel many times of quiet, many times of this, and nothing changed. So you're asking the question, and I'm giving you the answer. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Real quick, guys. So I wanted to make sure to fact check this before talking about it publicly, but it's Justin, because it is important about Oslo Accord. So I looked it up, and again, this is information from ChatGPT, so feel free to double check this. But I asked ChatGPT to tell me a list of terrorist attacks that happened after Oslo was signed, and they gave me at least a dozen that happened between 1994 and 1996. And then I asked it to tell me when expansion of settlements happened after Oslo was signed, and that started in 1997. So if we want to acknowledge the failure of Oslo, and again, feel free to fact check this and correct me, but if we want to understand the failure of Oslo, we cannot ignore the fact that after Oslo was signed, Palestinian terrorists started killing Israeli civilians, right? So
But they did it to sabotage the Oslo Accord. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I'm not denying that it didn't happen. But what I'm trying to say is Oslo. I didn't say that Oslo failed specifically because of settlements. What I tried to say, maybe I didn't articulate well, was that Oslo had two sides trying to destroy it. One of them was the settler movement, and the other one was Hamas. And if you look at, for example, 1996 in particular, the election after Yitzhak Rabin was assassinated, where you had Shimon Peres versus Netanyahu. Shimon Peres was a clear majority to win in 1996. But you had a campaign of Hamas bombings in Tel Aviv, 4 suicide bombers right after each other within a matter of weeks. It kept going until Netanyahu was able to win. And as soon as Netanyahu came to power, guess what? Quiet. Why? Because their objective wasn't to destroy Israel. Their objective wasn't to kill all the Jews and throw them in the sea. Their objective was get somebody in power who will derail this peace process. And that's why I'm saying the Oslo Accord was destroyed by both sides.
That's fine. But so then it's very important to understand the failure of Palestinian strategy time and time again. They literally sabotaged Oslo so Bibi would get elected so he could just continue to build.
But that's the factions of the enemies of peace. And you have that in the settlements. The settlers did it. They're doing it in Hebron. They're doing it in the West Bank. And Hamas is doing it. That's not against anything I'm saying.
Yeah, but the Israeli right, the Israeli right is only powerful because of the security threat. If there was no terror against Israelis, or if the primary energy around resistance was peaceful, like we saw in apartheid South Africa, like we saw in the American Civil Rights Movement, like we saw against British colonialism in India, the primary energy around resistance was peaceful. There was violence there, but not nearly to the same extent as we see here. It was peaceful resistance, and we saw its impact. So
Adar, the Palestinians led the Intifada, the first Intifada from 1987 to 1993. It was predominantly, okay, we can say stone throwing and stuff like that. It was not nearly as militant as what came afterwards. And again, the reaction was the same. Palestinian, and let me just say, under a Lapid government that lasted for about, a few months? Under a Lapid government, what did he do? He went into Ramallah and he went into 5 international organizations. Most of them, can contest what they did. Most of them were human rights, women's rights, medical rights and stuff, and he shut them down. These are things that happen. So whether we come with a sword or a flower, it's the same result. And this is the reason.
So I need to push back here. And again, this is not me saying this is Palestinian fault and not Israeli fault. I've always held that in order to solve this conflict, both sides are going to need to take responsibility and do a lot more.
And I'm agreeing with you, but we're not disagreeing. But what I'm saying is the claim here that Look made is that Palestinians have rejected everything, blah blah. And I'm trying to tell you there are forces on both sides, but the Israeli side is much more powerful. They are actually in power. The Palestinian side, Hamas is not in the ruling authority of the Palestinian Authority. In fact, PA has crushed Hamas in the West Bank. There are more people in jail, and they've done that. And that's why you look at the. I sent you the picture in WhatsApp, by the way.
Cool, thank you. The fact that Israel's in power means they're less likely to make concessions, right? So Palestinians being the one that always get the worst end of the deal, the ones who are living in worse conditions, the ones that have a higher civilian death toll with each escalation of violence, I'm calling for self-reflection, and clearly there needs to be deep self-reflection on Israeli society. Let me just give you one clear example. I made a post on Instagram. Somebody said it was about, how we can live in peace. Somebody said, but Palestinians need to stop hating us. I said, you know what? It's easy to say what Palestinians should do differently. What do you think we could do? You know what he said? Nothing, right? So there's a lack of imagination on the Israeli side. There's lack of accountability on the Israeli side. But Palestinians who are constantly getting the worst end of the deal, who have significant support in the international community, I'm calling on Palestinians and the international community who are supporting Palestinians to have a moment of self-reflection and ask themselves, what have been their primary means of resistance and what has that achieved for Palestinians? And if we want Palestinians to prosper, which is a noble cause, which is something that's important to me, this self-reflection needs to happen. So that's really where I'm coming from. I really need to use the bathroom real quick. So Zahar,
if I may.
You want to do it directly, or is it the crew? Can I go pee?
No, please go.
Okay, cool.
I don't know who is looking for peace in all the wrong places. I don't know how to address you by name.
He's a human being, not just a show host.
It will be John.
Can we try to discuss what's actually happening? Because there's a lot of reason why Jews or Palestinians may or may not feel justification, moral. Who's right or who's wrong versus what is actually happening right now, what Israel is currently doing. God forbid, there appears to be over 1 million displaced Gazans, maybe hundreds of thousands in refugee camps, and what the Israeli government is currently saying that they're going to do. I mean, Gabby's saying we want to destroy Hamas, and the most clear understanding of that is that Hamas just announced they have 35,000 fighters that are going to remain, and that Israel's basically saying they're going to kill 35,000 people. And so just the facts on the ground, and even the moral equivalency to say, are we going to go through it? Are we going to do it? Adar just said he risked being put in prison, that he could come back there and he could be forced to the front lines, and if he doesn't do it, he's going to be put in prison. And all like the Ben Gvir and Shmadrik, at least they're honest in their intentions. When even the leftist Israelis, it's tough to know what are they saying. Saying even the expulsion, saying that really what we want to do is expel the Gazans into the Sinai Peninsula, and they're never going to come back. And if we do have to go into Gaza in order to kill 35,000 militants, and that takes killing a few 100,000 civilians and the hundreds of thousands of ones that are currently displaced in Gaza, that who knows what's going to happen to them over the next few years. It was saying, yes, I justify that. I say we do it. And it was saying that's the facts on the ground. That's currently the consensus in Israel of 70% of Israelis, including the left, Benny Gantz, Yair Lapid. They both agree we have to destroy everyone in Gaza, including killing tens of thousands of people.
Duvid, Justin, and Zahar, let me ask you guys, though, do you think that post-October 7th that Israel should, become less secure? They're trying to tighten up now. They're still, they have 200 hostages still there.
If I may, I don't know your name, so I don't know how to address you.
Peace is fantastic.
Peace. Do you read Hebrew?
Can, better.
Okay, אז אתה מדבר עברית?
sorry.
You speak Hebrew fluently?
אני מדבר עברית, אני קורא, אבל לא כל כך.
Okay, do you follow Israeli news?
כן, כל הזמן.
You're muted.
I'm saying that's confirmation that he speaks Hebrew.
Sorry.
Oh.
I thought Zohar was asking me to speak in Hebrew. I apologize. Yes, I do read Israeli news. Thank you.
Okay. Do you know the parties in question? Do you know who is Gantz? Who is Smotrich, Ben Gvir, Miri Regev, Ofer Kasif?
Yeah,
Lapid,
I do.
all those
I do.
folks?
I'm
Okay.
to be honest, I'm more familiar with the American structure. I do notice a lot of parallels between the American structure and the Israeli structure, just based on how the media's, label situations. And, I am not for any far right crazies that make unbelievable statements that, in my opinion, they should be thrown out of the government and shouldn't be there in the first place. So I don't agree with anything like that. I guess in general, I'd say I'm a centrist and I want peace.
I wish we could identify which one is the centrist party in Israel, but currently everyone is pretending to be one.
Yeah,
Part of the super crazies.
Well, can we just focus on what they're actually saying
Sorry,
they're going to do?
I was trying to clarify that. I'm going to respond to you. So I'm just asking this because from my reading of the news of what's happening right now, there is no entry or exit strategy into Gaza.
Mhm.
Benjamin Netanyahu right now, he just came out in his last press conference saying that there will be questions and investigations and all these things after the end of the war. On his side, he wants to prolong the war as long as possible and say that we still have to go on, because once we end it, he has to come up for questioning. When it comes to the actual strategy and tactics of what we're doing, because there are international hostages right now, and the United States is not in favor of sacrificing those for the sake of Israel's military strategies, they are working or pressuring for negotiation. What we saw on Friday was a kind gesture between, I don't know how many movies between hostages negotiations have you watched, but they started negotiations. The Hamas released 2. That means the negotiations for releasing more hostages are keep on going. From what I know about Israel's government strategy for this conflict is beat Hamas first, which they have no idea how to do that and how many years it's going to take or how many lives it's going to cost, and bring back the hostages second. I mean, that they are willing to sacrifice the hostages for the sake of achieving whatever military goals they have in mind. This, for the Israeli public, is unacceptable by any means. There is a growing protest right now between the Forum of Hostages Families and other activists that are now seeing that there's actually no military strategy. The use of more arms is not really benefiting neither Israelis or the chances of bringing back hostages. So as time passes by and negotiations will proceed with the pressure of the United States to continue talking and allowing some humanitarian aid, we might have better chances of bringing our people back and relaxing the militarism that is now watching our nation. That's
I
it.
wanted to jump in real quick.
Sounds
Since
great.
you mentioned hostages,
Yeah.
the hostages and hostage negotiation in general. I've been reading Chris Voss's book, Never Split the Difference. I have it here. It's a really great book. And he's a hostage negotiator, one of the top hostage negotiators of the FBI. And he lays out, very, very good principles that should be used here, even in these discussions. Because whenever I'm listening closely to what everybody's saying, and a lot of what I hear is the emotion of fear. What will become of us if this happens? And when we put all these things on the table, that has to be acknowledged first. Because in the book, he lays out how, back with the David Koresh incident, where the FBI just went in with guns blazing and they just didn't even give anybody an ear. So I think the first thing that has to be said is we have to separate rhetoric from facts, and we have to separate those facts from the emotions and put it all together again. Because when we start using these facts as rhetoric, it only further complicates things. But sometimes we have to break things down because we have to ask some of these fundamental questions. Well, historically, the history can be very murky. Going all the way back to the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire and all these type of things, and all of these, the Oslo Accords later and all this type of stuff, 67, 48, where do you start the discussion? And personally, I think if you want to acknowledge who is at the table negotiating, you have to acknowledge what are the concerns of both sides. And negotiation does not happen unless those emotions are first acknowledged. The fear, what will become of us if this happens, has to be the main question.
Dovid mentioned something about he wanted to focus on the present situation, and I think it's important to do that, because he asked about what is Gantz saying or what is Smotrich saying or what. And I find it interesting that even while you have a war, what you call a war right now going on, if you look at a lot of what they're saying and what they're focusing on, it's not even about Gaza. For example, there was a settlement that was just approved, got a final approval that's next to the city of Al-Azariya, and which is deep in East Jerusalem. This is happening while there's a war. So while there's a war going on, while there's a supposed, we're going to go after Hamas, we're going to do all this other stuff, you have these guys. They're focusing. They're still. They're relentless. They're like, we're not going to give up on our West Bank. Like I said,
that's the rhetoric, though. I'm saying the fact is we have already displaced 500,000 Gazans.
Yeah, but you've also displaced thousands of Palestinians.
And right now, the goal, according to even the left, is to kill over 30,000 people. Even on the left, there's mass acknowledgement that what we need to do now is kill over 30,000 people.
They're still continuing on their path. Like I'm telling you, thousands of Palestinians have been displaced within the last week in the West Bank. Do we know about that?
Hundreds of thousands. When we talk the West Bank, it might matter, but we're avoiding the issue. We have already displaced over 500,000 people, and we have already given the command. The command has already been given to kill all of these people, and we're just waiting to do it.
So you're telling me if Israelis weren't attacked in the north, we're avoiding the issue? The front from Hezbollah is different from what's going on in
that matters. You can discuss it, but I'd say if we're talking about the fact is, like, Adar might be in prison next week for refusing to do this. That the command has been given. We're just waiting for the go-ahead. Israel is going to go in, and with the directive of killing 35,000 people, over 500,000 people have already been displaced, and there's very little knowledge about what's going to happen to them. And saying, God forbid, and we're talking about relatively side issues, and even like, okay, you're scared of what about Hezbollah? What about the West Bank?
Absolutely.
You're scared, but you're just talking about what we're about to do. And
David, are you talking about 35,000 Hamas members? Is that what you're talking about?
35,000 militant Hamas members. That have a justification.
Yeah.
That even on the left, there's broad consensus. 80% of Israelis want to go in with the ground invasion and kill those people. And if Adar's not willing to do it, he will go to prison.
I think Adar's not willing to do it because he doesn't want to put himself in danger or potentially kill a lot of civilians.
No, I don't think. I don't think that's his motivation. He can speak for himself, but I don't think Adar is.
His motivation doesn't matter.
His motivation is his conscience.
And he refuses, he will be sent to prison.
Would you snap if you could snap your finger, Adar? Would you snap your finger that Hamas is gone?
Yeah, I would. I would snap
single civilian death.
I would snap my finger. Yeah,
but 35,000 people. Oh my God!
If we could do it without any civilians being killed, then I would view that as for the greater good. But I would actually even rather send them to rehabilitation camps, and then because I believe there's always a path for redemption. But 35,000 for Israel to achieve its goals in Gaza, you're going to see likely 35,000 civilian casualties. Like let's put Hamas aside. In war combatants,
200,000. 35,000 is the militants, and not the civilians. Those are the people with machine guns that are already agreed to fight us.
Yeah, let me just make my position clear on me entering Gaza if I'm called. I don't know if I'm going to get called. I get to Israel next week. We'll see. But I said this at the beginning of the stream, but I'm sure we have a lot of new viewers. If I get called and I'm going to a position that is defensive, then there's a good chance I would do it. I recognize that Israel's military is essential for the survival of the Jews living on that land. That being said, a lot of what Israel does is not just for survival. And I don't want to fight for a government or military that I don't trust. I don't trust Bibi. I don't trust his cabinet. I don't trust the general. I don't think they have a clear vision of what the intention here is. So I'm not going to put myself at risk, and I'm not going to risk harming civilians when it's unclear what the actual goal is. So if I see that I'm being sent to something where I would be forced to potentially kill civilians, then I wouldn't do it. And if I refuse, it's possible I spend a few weeks in military prison, which, as I mentioned earlier, military prison is not that bad. and I'm not even dreading it that much.
And that's a different position than the one that he said that you were worried about your life. I don't think you're worried about your life. It's a
I mean,
conscious.
I definitely don't want to die, you know. But
But I'm just saying your motivation is that you're conscious. You're conscious.
For sure.
It's
I'm,
not.
I'm
But-
doing this.
But I wanted to say,
on ideological grounds.
but
And since
like
that's
the thing is, looking for peace mentioned something earlier as well that about the the Jewish revival of what happened during the Holocaust in Eastern Europe and things like that, and how this is a threat. But I want you, in which I definitely acknowledge, definitely, absolutely, and the thing is that like I want you to also remember that the Nakba happened in my parents' generation. Okay, where they saw people like evacuated from their house, people who were fleeing, who were physically removed, militarily removed, some were killed. And now this movement where you had Palestinians told, exit the country and go to Egypt, go live in Sinai temporarily. Do you realize the emotional and the trauma that causes Palestinians to think about something like that? Like telling 2 million people or 1 million people go settle in the Sinai desert until we go and do business and we'll allow you to come back. So,
listen,
this is historical trauma that's happened.
I feel your pain with that stuff. I don't disagree with anything you said there. I'm sure things happened during the Nakba that were atrocities that, what can we do? What can we do? I wish it was something we could do.
I'm not asking you to do something about it, but you're looking at it from your perspective like, this is on us. This is because of this. But you have to understand that there's trauma on our side that's literally like dismissed. I feel that you're like,
I'm trying to give you a country and funding, and I'll get you. What if we promised every Palestinian $50,000?
No.
Say, Israel,
freedom is worth more than money. Do you understand that? Do you understand you cannot write a check to buy people off? Do you understand that?
We're not
buying
we're buying your peace. We're giving you a good thing. You're getting your country. You can live forever in peace. I don't understand why this is a bad thing. You're buy me off. You're getting a great thing in return, your own country. So I don't understand how you can say, and if you want to say, Israel yourself,
well, in the terms of the rabbi, he said, what's his name? You can't make a pig kosher. Sorry, it's impossible.
Yeah, I mean, you're believing your own propaganda. I mean, you got to look at like reality is there's an expulsion at hand. The Nakba has already happened. We've already driven 500,000 people away off of their houses. They have a legitimate concern that they are going to be killed at our hands. And especially like if I were a Palestinian or Gazan listening to this conversation, I might legitimately think that we, not Israel, the 5 people on this panel, are considering killing them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the humanization of Palestinians is so often neglected, and maybe it's given a little bit of attention, but honestly, it's not the same. It's not fair. And Adar, you said that Palestinians need to self-reflect, and I think you know me for quite a bit now, and I think I self-respect more than probably any Palestinian you know. Maybe, I don't know. I'm giving myself too much credit, but the point is that do you realize what laughing stocks we are among our people? Because I sit here and say, let's self-reflect. Let's talk to Israeli. But how do you talk to a people and advocate peace with them? It's like fighting. It's like fighting a forest fire with a squirt gun. That's what I feel like. I'm in a forest that's on fire, and all I have
to gun down, and the fire goes away.
No, Habibi, it doesn't go away. I'm talking about squirt gun in the sense of water. So how do I spray with a little squirt gun put out a forest fire? It doesn't work. I'm overwhelmed right now.
Our fire exists because you have that squirt gun. Okay, we don't want to have this. We don't want to send our kids to the
I don't get what you're saying.
If I may for a second intervene, and David, thank you very much for strengthening and emphasizing how urgent is the call for a ceasefire has to be. I'm personally supporting everyone who's supporting for a ceasefire, including the Israeli activists that are trying to do that. And for now, what we're seeing is the government is increasing its efforts in blocking any kind of pro-peace activity or anti-war. Today, they blocked an event of Arab-Jewish grassroots movement in Haifa, and they threatened the venue owner that they will close down shop in case they will have the event anyways. They're now closing down Al Jazeera in Israel. Israel Fry, the Hasidic anti-occupation journalist, was chased after his home and is now reporting from a hiding spot that someone organized for him. There is a real crackdown on anyone protesting the war in any kind of way.
it's real. I see that it's happening also in Western media, where they take out Muslim anchors, where people are getting fired for expressing any kind of sympathy towards the innocent people that are currently being killed in Gaza. It's horrible, and I appreciate you raising this. I hope that
not the headlines I'm seeing. To be honest, Zohar, in Canada, to be honest, there's a lot of like humanitarian crisis and not, Hamas militant.
I understand you. As it is, the reality of the situation right now is all these protests, whatever it is that is happening, the leaders of each one of these countries express their full, unconditional support to Israel in whatever it is that it's doing, and they allowed for a little bit of 22 trucks to go into Gaza, which is insane small amount for a population of 2 million people right now that are going through under constant bombardment. Again, what we're seeing in the political leadership and among mainstream media is that Israel has the right to defend itself and is carrying out a war. What I can see, we're looking at both sides of what's happening in Gaza, that we had a horrible attack on our population on October 7th, that it's dreadful, and my heart goes for all of the victims and all of their families and anyone who was affected. But I'm seeing the families of these people now begging that we stop the bombardment because they do not see how any more killing is going to bring their family members back. Anyone who's been affected directly, anyone who lives close to Gaza knows exactly that another round of bombardment, another round of war is not going to make them feel any safer, and they're begging for a political solution, and first and foremost for our criminal in chief to resign immediately. Yeah.
Great comments. Zohar, can I ask you a quick question as well?
Guys, I do want to wrap it up. So,
Sorry.
Peace, you could ask Zohar a question, then everybody will get a final thoughts. But, this was actually a great, where did the time go? 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think we'll do one call-in show a week, so I'd love to have you all back. Yeah, go on, Peace, ask away.
Yes, thanks, Adar. I appreciate every single one of you guys as well. This is, as weird as it sounds, it's like therapy to talk it through, because it's honestly, my mind is just out of fog constantly. And, just having you guys talk this through with me feels fantastic. So I appreciate you guys are all, very well, knowledge in the situations. I appreciate that. And I do understand that my views aren't exactly the views of the Israeli government, and they're not going to, they don't necessarily follow what people in general who are looking for peace want to do, right? But when I stated to Justin that if I had this magic wand that I can wave and I can, give the Palestinians a country and, have it so they have their own state and they can trade with Israel, and all the funding they get from Iran can be used for other means, I think that would be amazing. And Zohar, can I ask you, would you accept a peaceful state alongside the state of Israel, the West Bank, Gaza, connected by a superhighway if you wish, if that's the issue, or free passage through or whatever, and free trade, like a Canada-US type thing, where there's still borders? I cannot run into the US because we're at peace with the US. I am stopped at the border. If I don't have my passport, they turn me away. Okay? If they think I have a bomb, they search me like crazy. They'll rip my car apart and I'll have to pay the bill. So that's just the countries. I think that would be great if we were peaceful nations like Canada, US, and we still have to make sure that we didn't attack each other, of course. Go ahead, Zahar. Would you take a peaceful nation next to Israel?
Thank you. Looking for peace. I appreciate you taking the time to explain what the border between countries is to me.
I don't know, because some people make it seem like you have to remove it and people can just run back and forth. I'm not explaining to you because you don't understand it. I'm explaining because it seems like the world's gone mad when it comes to what a border is. We still have borders. That's it. I'm sorry, I'm not,
No, I appreciate the question and understand where you're coming from. I say this because I was there. I'm an Israeli, born and raised. I served in the military. I left Israel at the age of 21. I used to be as argumentative and vocal pro-Israel up until 10 years ago. I think it was during the first bombardment of Gaza in 2006, where I screamed at an Irish broadcaster how Israel has the right to defend itself. It took me several rounds of bombardment understanding that what is happening is not necessarily the way that is being presented to me. And I had the privilege of meeting other people that show to me how things look like from the other side. So I know where you're coming from. I hope that with talking more and more, perhaps you'll trust me and the other colleagues in this panel to maybe share some information that might change your mind in time. Now, I fully support the idea of what you described is amazing. First of all, I am not a Palestinian to make that the kind of determination. I'm an Israeli person. I know that the agreement that was offered to the Palestinians without them having any kind of legal competence to read through all the agreements and all the titles and all the declarations and all the statements and having the negotiation skills and what Israel and the US brought to the table when they were discussing the negotiations, the deal that they were offered did not include the right of return, which is principal and pivotal for the Palestinian people to go back to their land. Now, this is something that Israel is not willing in any kind of way.
Can we define, the right of return?
Yes.
Would that entail, let's say they have their own country, they can bring in as many people they want into Gaza and the West Bank, or they go back into Israel and decide this was my grandparents'
If you go
house?
back to Palestine, the Gaza and West Bank, Israel did not allow for that either.
Really? In their own country where they could have 20 million people in the Gaza and the West Bank, Israel would have no, okay. Yeah. I'm not against that. I'm against them going into Israel saying this was my land here. This is now my, in that sense, should Jews go back to Germany, Poland, so on and say, oh, I lived here too. So, I'm just saying.
I have a Romanian passport because my parents migrated from Romania to Israel in the 1960s. Most of my friends, their parents came from Europe, claim their European passport because it's, beneficial, employment, school, and other stuff wise. Most of us do that. Palestinians cannot even visit the place that their grandparents live. Never mind get a citizenship or claim any property that was lost. They cannot even visit.
Oh, I understand that. I mean, in my idealistic, dual nation situation, they can visit, they can have an airport, they can do whatever they want. In my opinion, then they'd have the right of return.
But the problem is that was never on the table. Again, I have family members.
The definition of right of return, because my past viewing of it was that
I think
as part of my last comment, I want to say that I understand where you're coming from, but I really think you need to look at the details of some of these past presentations. Like, for example, Mahmoud Abbas, one thing that he said to the negotiations is he even said 80% of Palestinians most likely might not even bother coming back, because you have to understand it's hard to relocate to a new country and start a new life. So, and he even said one time he's born in Safat. Safat is in 48 territories in the north, and he acknowledged he would not go back and he's not going to be able to go. This has been said by Palestinian leaders. So to say that if Palestinian president has said this, this means that the leader has said it. He's acknowledged that this is something of a reality, and it's true. The right of return is something that's very, like, hey, you guys can go settle in another country, stuff like that. And it would be like telling Jews, hey, you guys, your people who live overseas and stuff don't have the right of return. So there's a lot of issues, even legal issues that we face. I want to thank David for bringing a really good humanitarian take on this. I really do appreciate that. And I think that you kept us grounded on that. And Zohar as well. I think that you brought, your consciousness as well as your outlook on this, which is very important. Looking for peace, like I said, you definitely have. I'm sorry to say this, but you definitely you do have what you can say. Yeah, in a perfect world with a perfect solution, everything, sure. But to be honest with you, there's never offered. And my final take is that when there's peace, when there's negotiations, there are factors that are working really, really aggressively to sabotage it. The thing that I think we need to overcome that's going to be important for us moving forward is that the question to us is not whether or not Palestinians or Israelis want peace or a two-state solution or whatever. The question is, are we going to be strong enough to weather these people who try to sabotage our move forward? Are we going to allow them to win? Because right now, guess what? The settlers have won. Hamas has won. I don't care if they're destroyed. I don't care if they're defeated, if they're removed from Gaza. They have won because they have accomplished their mission. They can now go to their masters in Qatar and Iran and fill their bank accounts. They have won. The settlers have won because they said, aha, look, the minute these Palestinians came in, they massacred us. Okay, they have won. And it's because this is exactly, do you think Hamas intended to destroy the state of Israel with this attack of 1,400 people? Come on. Let's be realistic. They knew they weren't going to succeed. They said, maybe we'll kill 100 people. Maybe we'll kill 1,000 people. Maybe if we're lucky, we'll kill more people. This is their thinking. They didn't have tanks. They didn't have F-16s. They didn't have all this other stuff. So this is the realistic thing. They did this because they're trying to say, we need to be relevant. We need to be in power. We're here to do that. So we need to be honest with ourselves. We do need self-reflection, but at the same time, we have to have our government and our policies in Israel. I'm going to hold them more accountable because they are in power. They have the support of the United States, the West, and everything, and they are acting irresponsible. And their reckless policy, which has been going on for far too long, is why we're here today. The Palestinians are to blame, but I'm going to say 70% is on Israel's fault, maybe even 75.
Thank you, Justin. Anybody else? Final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I was just going to mention to Justin that, yeah, listen, sorry, David, I do apologize there. I do pay attention to the details. I think you're painting a lot of Israelis with the same brush, which I think the majority of Israelis do want to see something good happen at the end of this. You know, we have nowhere else to go. This is, you know, in my mind, as much as you say that Palestinians will fight to the end, I think you have to realize Israelis are thinking that too. And I don't think that Hamas thought they were going to, you know, destroy all of Israel with this one attack. But I do think that they provoked, you know, this retaliation to happen, which is awful on both ends of it. So, you know, thank you, Justin, for acknowledging that it was Hamas that initiated it with that attack and caused all this, you know, new uprising to happen and the dominoes to fall in this direction, which is big of you to say. I don't know about those percentages you threw out there of blame. I think that, you know, it could have happened.
But I'm not acknowledging that we started on October 7th. I think this is something that's been building up for a long time. I'm refusing to do that, and I'm not going to be one of those people who are going to be an apologist for what happened. Yes, it was terrible. Yes, people should be held accountable to war crimes, but I want Israelis to be held to war crimes just as if Hamas committed a war crime, they should be charged. Just like any Israeli who commits a war crime should be charged. I'm not going to belittle one over the other.
No disagreement there.
Okay, thanks, Adar. You know, mention, God forbid, I was relatively good friends with Samantha Wool, who was killed this week in Detroit. Although the police are saying it's very unlikely it was anti-Semitic. And I studied 3 years in Jerusalem. I almost made Aliyah in Haredi schools, and then went back to Brooklyn. I was loosely involved with the Kahanist in Brooklyn for a few years. I know their thinking. And but I had the universal humanist education. Thank God, the Roper School in Metro Detroit. That made me sympathetic to Palestinians. I opposed the 2002 Lebanon war. When they built the wall, I thought it was a bad idea, but my opinion didn't matter. Unfortunately, I think these conversations now are largely irrelevant. Could have, should have, would have. The fact is, we're already at war. We've already displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The official policy position of Israel now is likely to lead to the death of minimally tens of thousands of people, possibly hundreds of thousands of people. My understanding is that the senior Israeli commanders are saying, look for Israel to lose over 10,000 soldiers, let alone what Hamas is going to lose. And so, like, God forbid this is a disaster. I pray for peace and de-escalation, but unfortunately, I think it is zero-sum. Either you have to give up on Zionism and somehow absorb the Palestinians and Arabs as equal, or they're going to have to push for expulsion. And my knowledge of being a Jew and even the Jewish reaction to my opinions is there's a lot more Jews pushing for expulsion than there is for absorption. So, God bless you, Adar. I know you're in a difficult situation because you might be carrying a gun, carrying out these, God forbid, however you want to put it. And, so unfortunately, the time for these conversations, I've been going to events where I was almost the lone Jew among Palestinians for 20 years. And I said, I think even Samantha Wool, that I was one of the first people to bring her into interfaith and, working together with Muslims. Very few Jews do that. And at this point, war has already been declared. So pray for the best. Thanks a lot, Adar.
Thank you, David, and sorry for the loss of your friend.
Yeah, I just want to say a lot of my friends also know Samantha Wool and worked with her, including Rashida Tlaib, who and her advisor as well, one of her advisors. And it was very tragic, and I'm sorry for your loss today. To it.
Well, I mean, it's all of our losses, and thinking Yeah, I mean, Sam, I met Sam 100 times, was always in crowds, and she obviously knew thousands of people. She had a way of making you think they were special. And Adar's probably like that too. Like, I've been on his panels, he speaks to thousands of people. So you're like, oh, I'm buddies with Adar. But like in reality, there's probably tens of thousands of people who feel like that.
Everyone I've ever spoken to is my buddy.
Me too.
Of course. Especially the angry people in the comments. Those are my biggest buddies of them all.
I need to read them, by the way, because I'm on the. How could you make it?
It's actually been pretty good for the most part.
Really?
Honestly, yeah.
I'll catch up on them later.
Zohar, you want to leave a final thought? Somebody just Francisco said. Francisco writes,
no, just
real quick. Francisco says, I went to high school with Adar, so cool. Well, good to see a high school friend here. If you were in my grade or any grade younger, then you must have known that I changed quite a bit since then. They didn't even let me walk at my high school graduation. If you guys want to know how big of a troublemaker I was, but yeah,
that'll be a different show. We want to hear that story.
I'll tell you one day. Yeah. Zaria, what's up?
Yeah. Again, just the only thing to say right now, let's pray for a ceasefire and get everyone that we know to support that, bring the people back and stop killing innocent civilians. All of us should be as active as possible in doing that right now.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Yeah, I think it's important, and also the ceasefire, but it's also important for our elected officials to hear from us, because the money that's going for war, the money that's going for it's literally going really quick. So we need to put pressure on this, because to protest is not enough, to speak is not enough. The elected officials have to hear it. So if you're in the United States, or if you're in Canada, or one of the Western countries that's going to be providing support for this war, this killing, you have to make it clear to these people, please stop it, for God's sake, because otherwise there will be the bloodbath that David has so outlined, and that's one of the ways that people. So we're not hopeless, or helpless, I should say. We're not helpless people. We do have power. So whatever country you live in, please, that's what you need to do.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to drop a link to Discord if you all want to continue the conversation. We could have a little after party there. I do need to go, but for those new to Discord, you join on that link on the left-hand side. You'll see it says lounge, click lounge, and then you'll be connected. You could just listen, but you could also speak. Just some final words on my end. Again, thank you for tuning in. If you're new here, please subscribe. If you want to support the show, there's ways to do that monetarily. You could click the join button here on YouTube, or you could look at a link in the description and contribute. But we're also always looking for volunteers to help doing clips and whatnot, and even helping us book other interesting guests. And just in terms of, where we're at, I'm not even going to say I wish for a ceasefire, but I also don't wish for a ground invasion. What I wish for is a change in the status quo. So if that comes through a ceasefire, that's what I support. If that comes through a ground invasion, reluctantly, that's what I support. Because a ceasefire that just gets us back to the same situation in a few years isn't worth it. Whatever decision we make next needs to be not with the intention to just have short-term calm, but long-term peace. There's no better security than long-term peace. So that's what our vision needs to remain on. In terms of just the content we're doing here, and just an appreciation for everybody showing up. There's a lot of, everybody has an opinion on Israel-Palestine. Everybody, go on Twitter, go watch the news. Most of the spaces where people are conversing, it's really not Israelis and Palestinians coming together for these respectful conversations despite our differences. Even Twitter Spaces, which is a format that really can foster a lot of conversation. Generally, you have either very pro-Israel people or pro-Palestine people hosting the spaces, and they only let people who agree with them on stage. So we are dedicated to continuing this form of reconciliation and just fostering understanding between each other by having these conversations. And I've said this many times, but I'll say it again. I'd like to get to the point where this YouTube channel loses its relevance because everybody's doing it. The only reason why we're interesting right now is because very few people are having conversations, respectful conversations between opposing sides. Let's build a world where there's dozens and even hundreds of other channels and outlets for such formats, and we lose relevance. working for that day. So thank you all. We're probably going to have another live stream on Friday between Zach Corner and Zach Foster, a Zionist Jew and an anti-Zionist Jew. And we'll do another call-in show next week. So yeah, thank you all. And whoever comes to Discord, the conversation continues.